Survival myths that would actually get you killed. Once again, you and your best bro are bored out of your minds on the couch. The last time you guys were this bored, you guys ended up watching Bear Grylls so much that you got inspired to try to be like him. And because of the insane misadventures that you and your friend already went on, you decided that you are never going to be putting yourself in survival situations again. However, as you guys are watching TV, you notice a commercial for a cruise. And this inspires you and your best bro, because going on a cruise seems like the perfect way to experience nature while also remaining safe and away from any sort of survival situations. You and your bro pack your bags and head on your way to your next vacation. As you guys make it to the port, you enter the boat only to realize that the people on the boat are handing out pamphlets. You grab one of these pamphlets and realize that what they're handing out isn't a pamphlet at all. It's actually a book on totally real survival tips. And while you kind of brush this off as standard safety protocol in case anything bad happens, you definitely find it a bit ironic. And now your totally safe vacation has begun. While unpacking, your bro has already gotten into the alcohol in the room and is now way too intoxicated for 11 a.m. You try to ignore his drunken ramblings while you unpack until you realize that he's opening the door to the balcony and it looks like he's not stopping. Your friend was only trying to get a peek at the view when he actually falls overboard into the water. Instantly, this puts your friend into the first survival situation of this video. With your friend overboard and you looking down at him, you quickly run to that survival book that you were given and read to him what you should do if you fall overboard. As your friend looks smaller and smaller in the water as the cruise ship drifts away, you yell to your friend that if he wants to live, he has to swim as hard as possible to try to catch up to the boat. Your friend tries to swim as quickly as possible to catch up to the boat and uses almost all of his energy. And while this may seem logical to try to swim to the closest safety if you are abandoned at sea, this is actually the first myth of this video. In this specific situation, when you're in the middle of the water and fall off a cruise ship, the last thing you want to do is try to overexert yourself. Cruise ships move way faster than any human can swim. And even if you know that you can't catch up to it and you're just trying to, be as close as possible, you are still putting yourself at a massive risk. And the simple reason is, in this situation, this energy that you are exerting is going to make you lose body temperature and also lose stamina quickly. Two things that will only speed up your death in the water. What you actually want to do in this situation is to remain calm and begin to float, trying to move as little as possible while also trying to make yourself as visible as possible. The main reason why you want to float is so you can conserve as much energy as possible. Because in the ocean, your body is already going to be working double time just to try to maintain its body temperature. And the reason why you want to be as visible as possible is because the only way that you're getting saved in this situation is either by a rescue boat or by a rescue helicopter. And fortunately for your bro, a rescue helicopter was not only able to spot him, but was able to drop a ladder and pick him up, flying him back to the cruise ship on the helipad. Now, you meet your bro on the helipad and decide that you are already done with this cruise, and you decide that it's time to get off this cruise ship and to get out of here entirely. You actually board the helicopter with your bro, and you guys decide to fly back home. Although it's on that helicopter ride from the cruise ship back home that you guys end up on another adventure. As this helicopter flies over an extremely remote area, a storm appears seemingly out of nowhere. Lightning strikes the helicopter and you all go down. You and your bro wake up in a daze and realize that the pilot is gone, the helicopter is useless, and you two are once again, unintentionally, in a survival situation. And your sole goal is to survive and get home with only the shirts on your back and the information in this book that has already proven to be not so helpful. Being stranded once again, you and your bro decide to take a different approach than you did in the first adventure. The last time you guys tried to survive in the wilderness, you instantly tried to find your way out. But today, you decide that your best course of action is to set up camp exactly where you are. Because if your best chance of surviving at sea is to wait to be found, you figured you should probably do the same thing when you're lost in the forest as well. And for that reason, you and your bro instantly start to build shelters. Obviously, neither of you are formally trained in bushcraft architecture. However, you've seen those videos at 2 a.m. with the guys building crazy water slides and whatnot, so you had a good idea. You decided to refer to this pamphlet from the cruise ship to see if it had any wisdom about this, and it actually did. It said that you can complete survival projects at a normal pace in a survival situation. And it was that information that gave you and your buddy confidence to go all out. Instead of initially building a fire or looking for food, you and your friend decide that the best course of action is to chop trees and build a 2-story house with a water slide. Those guys on YouTube do it in a day. We can do that too. However, after nearly 12 hours of collecting resources and trying to build, you and your bro have nearly no progress. You have a pile of logs, 2 stakes in the ground, and you and your friend are exhausted with basically nothing to show for it. And this leads to our second survival myth. The myth being that you can complete survival projects at a normal pace. Here's the thing. Those guys in the YouTube video, first of all, many of them are using actual machinery off screen, but even the ones that are doing it for real are not in genuine survival situations. They have access to food and water and shelter at their leisure, meaning that they can actually work at a regular pace. However, in a survival situation, any project is going to take much longer. And the reason for this isn't because you just are lacking the tools, it's actually because your your energy expenditure and your time management are critical for your survival. Just look at you and your friend right now. Even though you guys spent the entire day grinding, you have nothing to show for it, you have empty bellies, you have no fire and no shelter. You guys are weak, exhausted, and dehydrated. And because you underestimated the effort that goes into surviving in the wilderness, you are now on the verge of death. What you should have done when establishing a camp is first and foremost establishing a fire, using this wood to build a fire that you could consistently add to provide both warmth and light. And this light specifically would be crucial for being found. And then, once your fire is established, you want to put all of your effort and energy into finding food. Bugs, small animals, plants, whatever it may be, you need to find a lot of food. Edible food in a survival situation is hard to come by, and even what you do come by is typically not plentiful, meaning that a lot of your energy and time is going to go directly into trying to replenish your energy with more food. And with all of the time and effort required to simply feed yourself and sustain your own life, you're going to have little to no time to sustain your fire or to build these crazy projects as well. Fortunately for you and your bro, your plot armor is stronger than ever. And even though you two are both feeling incredibly weak after spending an entire day doing almost nothing, one of the luckiest things that could happen happens. Lightning just so happens to strike that big pile of wood you collected, starting you the perfect fire. But not only do you now have a fire, which is already a blessing, you notice a wild blind chicken walking directly into your fire. You and your friend just went from making a fatal mistake to now essentially being the winners of the lottery. And with a fire to warm you through the night and food to sustain you through the night, you both decide to get some sleep and continue your adventure in the morning. You wake up the following morning, your fire is out, your food is gone, and you decide to learn from the mistakes of last night. You realize that the most important thing you can do right now is look for food. And while you are already feeling nervous about how you are going to find more food, your friend opens the survival book and reads, "You can survive solely off survival foods." And with this information, he seems confident that he can sustain you guys off of random plants. And following his lead, you guys begin to forage. You both begin to gather things like tree bark, lily pad tubes, hemlock needles, and snails. And after hours of foraging, you come back to your base camp to find a pretty disappointing meal. And after eating everything you collected, you realize that you actually spent more calories trying to find this meal than this entire meal gave you. Meaning that you would have been better off not looking for any of this stuff in the first place. Which is why this is actually another survival myth. Survival foods are exactly as they sound. They're meant for survival situations, although they cannot sustain you long term. It's important to understand what you can and can't eat in the wilderness. However, it's also important to consider the context that these survival foods are not and cannot be your main source of nourishment. And while they're better than nothing, eating these foods are typically only a band-aid solution until you're able to find some sort of actual sustenance, either from fishing or trapping an animal. At this point, you and your bro are becoming very suspicious of this survival book from the cruise ship, because so far, nothing's been right. Although it's your only source of survival information, and for that reason, you have no choice but to follow it. You and your bro give up on finding any more food for now, and instead switch your focus because at this point, it's been days since you and your bro had water. And the human body can go a lot longer without food than it can water, and you are already beginning to feel the effects of dehydration. Interestingly, when you discuss being dehydrated with your friend, he disagrees with you, and he says that, "I don't feel super thirsty right now, so I don't think I need water." And while you know that you definitely need water because it's been so long, you realize that you don't actually feel particularly thirsty either, but you know you don't feel right, which is why for this reason you decide to consult the book. And this book, in its infinite wisdom, literally says, unless you are feeling extremely thirsty, you are in no way dehydrated. And with this information, your friend reassures you that you do not need to find water now, and your friend even tells you that on your pursuit of finding civilization, you'll probably find water anyway, even though we don't need it right now, because we're not thirsty. With no proof to counter his claim, you follow his lead once again, and you guys continue on your pursuit. However, only after a few hours of walking, you notice that both you and your friend start to feel dizzy, and really quite tired. Your friend stops at a tree to take a leak, and you happen to notice that his urine is literally brown. Now, in the least sus way possible, you try to bring this to his attention, and all you get back is some slurred ramblings about how it doesn't matter and you're being weird. And before you know it, your friend passes out directly in front of your face. And only moments later, you notice your vision start to turn black as well, and you also hit the floor. You and your friend are both laying down on your backs with your mouths wide open, and you've once again fallen victim to another survival myth. You don't need to be extremely thirsty to be dehydrated. And because you and your friend directly ignored the early warning signs of dehydration, it led to you both reaching a point of no return. The truth of the matter is this: people typically assume that dehydration only begins once you start to feel very thirsty. but that's actually the opposite of the truth. Thirst and extreme thirst are typically a late-stage warning sign of dehydration, and the early-stage signs are typically very subtle. These signs include a dry mouth, darker than usual urine, a headache, fatigue, irritability, dizziness. And I think in our day-to-day lives, we're all pretty good at managing our hydration and noticing when we're dehydrated before feeling thirsty. However, in a survival situation, cues that you may be dehydrated can typically be disregarded as either stress or hunger or tiredness, and for that reason, you can forget to drink until it's too late. Fortunately for you and your friend, passed out in near death on the ground, a torrential downpour just happens to happen right above you. And this downpour fills both of your mouths with water, and you both instinctually swallow it, hydrating yourselves and saving yourselves once again. However, you now may be hydrated, but you are cold and wet. And while that rain was nice, you do need a consistent source of water if you want to continue to live. And for that reason, you don't listen to your friend and you say, "We are looking for water, and we're going to look now." Although, that brings you to your next issue. How do you find water in the middle of the forest? Reluctantly, you know that your only option is to refer to the book. And while your confidence is low, you read the next survival tip. And it says, follow birds to find water. There are many survival myths claiming that if you follow a bird, eventually it will lead you to water. Right after you finish telling your friend how you guys are going to find water, you notice a group of geese flying above. And this looked like your ticket to hydration, because not only were geese birds, but geese are also known to fly towards water. And for that reason, you and your friend quickly sprint to follow these geese to see wherever they may go. After running through the woods for what feels like hours, you notice that you have come out of the woods and into a large clearing. And luckily, you notice these geese descending, and you begin to get excited that you have now found water. However, as these geese land and you approach these geese, you realize that the geese weren't heading towards water at all. They were only heading to an opening to take an afternoon nap. And once again, you and your friend have fallen for a survival myth. The idea that you can follow birds to find water is not completely false, but it is unreliable. For example, it is true that some aquatic birds stay close to water and typically can lead you to water eventually. It's also true that they can travel long distances away from water to find food or shelter. And in the example of the geese that you just followed, it's just as likely that you could follow these geese to a body of water as it is you could follow them to an open field where they plan on sleeping for the night. The reality is that you can't predict where a bird is going, and following it is a gamble and likely a waste of time. And if you do find yourself in a survival situation and happen to see an aquatic bird, I would definitely take that as a sign that you're close to water. However, I wouldn't necessarily follow it, as it could put you into more danger than you were originally in. Now, with you and your friend bamboozled in the middle of a field, you decide that your only option is to continue forward. And as you traverse forward, you notice that the grass turns into sand, and you go from the plains biome to the desert biome, and things are about to get complicated. Most notably, your need for water has just gone up exponentially. Feeling desperate, you decide to consult the book, when your friend slaps the book out of your hand and tells you, "Okay, enough with this book, it has never been right. I have an idea." I remember watching that survival TV show, and the guy built a solar still. All we need to do is dig a hole in the ground, put some plastic over top, and we will have an infinite water source. When your friend said this, you were kind of shocked and almost thought you were hallucinating, because for the first time ever, your friend said something that was actually logical and somewhat smart, and you confidently follow his lead. It is until you run into your first issue. To build a solar still, you need some sort of plastic to catch the water. You ask your friend if he had any plastic whatsoever, and he, somewhat embarrassingly, pulls out his wallet, and from his wallet, pulls out a condom. You don't probe your friend on what he planned on using this condom for. However, from this point on, your guard is up a little extra, but you decide to focus back on the solar still. You and your friend dig the hole, put the plastic over top of the hole, put a rock in the center, and wait for moisture to be drawn out of the ground through the hot desert sun, and have it collect and drip into the small makeshift bowl at the bottom of the pit you made with leaves. Building the solar still took roughly a few hours, and you two were sweating incredibly in the hot sun making this. After the few hours you spent making it, you wait another hour to see exactly what this solar still is able to produce, when you realize that after an hour, you're only able to get a few milliliters. And you realize that the solar still was a net negative, because not only is it going to yield you not nearly enough water to survive, but once again, you exerted more energy and hydration creating the solar still than it could ever replenish, meaning that you once again fell for a survival myth. This one's a bit interesting, because solar stills definitely do have a very practical and realistic application in certain scenarios. However, in this scenario of being in the desert, it is an extremely impractical way of getting water. And this is because the amount of water you can get from a solar still really depends on a few factors, specifically ground moisture, temperature, and climate, and the size of the still. If you're trying to draw water out of a dry desert, you can basically guarantee that you will get little to no water in a meaningful amount of time. However, if you you were in a place that was reasonably moist, or potentially in a place that had water that just wasn't usable, let's say salt water, then you could definitely use a still to purify water that was otherwise unclean. However, when you're in the desert, there is no water to purify, and the water you can draw out of the ground is minimal, meaning that you have to abandon the still and continue looking elsewhere for water. Going behind your friend's back to see if the book had any other wisdom on finding water, you read that the book says that you can drink water from any cactus in the desert. And luckily for you, you were in the desert and there was plenty of cactus around. And without disclosing that you got this information from the book, you tell your friend that you have an idea. We can go drink water from these cactuses. Let's go. So you and your friend both approach a cactus, you carefully rip off one of the arms, and you begin to drink the goo that's dripping out of it. Almost instantly, your friend begins to vomit, and you start spewing from the other end. And unfortunately, you are once again the victim of a deadly survival myth. It is totally true that there are cacti out there that contain drinkable water that can actually hydrate you safely. However, unlike the movies make it out to seem, you cannot do this for every cactus. Most species of cactus don't contain drinkable water whatsoever. And what they actually contain is a bitter, slimy liquid filled with alkaloids and other compounds that can make you sick and actually dehydrate you further. And unfortunately, this was a lesson you and your friend had to learn the hard way. As you pull up your pants after the anal exorcism you just had from the cactus water, you look at your friend to notice something terrifying. Your friend, wiping his mouth from the gross cactus puke, looks at you confused, wondering what you're staring at. When you look at his forehead and see that when he puked, he impaled his head with a massive cactus spike. You ask your friend if he feels anything and if he is in any pain. And he says no, after he puked, he actually feels a lot better. However, he's still pretty thirsty. But he doesn't say anything about the massive cactus spike simply sticking out of his skull. Your friend seems concerned because he can tell you're freaking out about something, but you won't tell him what's going on. Instead, you open the book and see if it has any wisdom about what to do when you've been impaled. And of course, the book has a survival tip for you. The book claims that if anybody is impaled by something, the best thing to do is immediately remove it. And to you, this initially makes sense, because if there is a foreign object in your body, obviously you don't want it there. And if you can remove it, you should. And so because of this, you simply tell your friend to sit down, tell him to relax, and say that there's something on his head that you're gonna just quickly remove. With your friend sitting down, you tell him to close his eyes, and you grab the massive spike and rip it out of his head. As soon as you rip the spike out of his head, you realize that the spike was actually holding in a flash flood of blood. So you quickly re-impale your friend in the head with this spike and act like nothing happened at all. At this point, your friend opens his eyes, sees the blood, and demands to know what's going on. And you tell him the truth. And surprisingly, he actually has a pretty insightful response, and he tells you that no, the book was wrong again. If you become stabbed or impaled by an object, one of the worst things you can do is instantly try to remove it. Depending on where you're stabbed, pulling out the object could cause massive bleeding, disrupt any of the clotting that has potentially begun, and it can also worsen the damage by pulling out the object incorrectly, or if the object is barbed. The best thing that you can actually do in this situation is try to stabilize the object to ensure it doesn't move at all. It sounds counterintuitive, but you actually want to maintain this object stabbed in you at the same depth, at the same pressure, until you can get medical attention. And that's exactly what you do. In shock of how insightful your friend was, out of nowhere once again, you notice that your friend firmly holds the base of the spike and breaks off the rest. After this, your friend takes one of his socks, wraps it around his head to ensure that the spike doesn't go anywhere, and from this point, you guys continue to keep moving. As you both walk through the desert, the sun begins to set, and you happen to stumble upon a cave and decide that this was the perfect place to spend the night. Hungry, dehydrated, and exhausted, you and your friend sit there, finally relaxing for the first time in what feels like days. And while you and your friend look a lot worse for wear, you're at least happy to be alive. And it's within this small moment of gratitude that you notice that your friend not only has a bloody sock wrapped around his head, but he's also developing a bloody nose. At this point, this is very concerning because with how dehydrated you and your friend are, any loss of moisture could be deadly. And with how much blood your friend has already lost up until this point, you guys are really not in a position to lose any more. Your friend begins to get very lightheaded, and for that reason, you decide to help him with his bloody nose. And fortunately, for this situation, you don't need to consult the book because everybody knows how to deal with a bloody nose. Obviously, what you want to do is tip your head back to stop the bleeding. And you do exactly that. Your friend is sitting, you stand behind him, and you tilt his head backwards, and you notice that he's now coughing up the blood that was coming out of his nose, meaning that the bleeding was not stopping whatsoever. It was just being misdirected. Because of this, you decide to let him go, and because he is so tired, he happens to just lean forward. And due to this forward lean, his nosebleed actually stops relatively quickly, turning a survival myth into an unintentional survival truth. Here's what I mean. I don't know about you, but I remember growing up, every time I had a nosebleed, people told you to hold the bridge of your nose and tilt your head back. And while this is a common tip that has been passed down through generations, it's actually been heavily debated, and at this point in time is kind of been debunked basically fully. It's been shown time and time again that tilting your head backwards is actually unsafe and can make the situation worse, as we saw with your friend. When you tilt your head backwards, the blood doesn't stop. It simply flows down your throat, which could directly cause you to swallow blood, leading to nausea or vomiting, or potentially even choking in severe cases, which is why what you actually want to do is basically the opposite. If you get a nosebleed, according to the Red Cross, the most effective way to end it safely is to sit upright or even lean slightly forward, because leaning slightly forward can help reduce the blood pressure in the veins in your nose, which would help slow the bleeding, while also ensuring that the blood drains out of your nose instead of down your throat and potentially into your stomach or lungs. Once seated in this position, you do actually want to grab the soft part of your nose right below your bridge, and then simply wait 10 to 15 minutes while maintaining a consistent pressure and this consistent position until the blood flow stops. And it's really as simple as that. And it's kind of interesting how the fact is so close yet so far from the fiction, and most people, at least in my experience, always tilt their head back, when in reality, going the opposite direction is the most ideal way to go about it. Now, another pro-level tip you could do if you have a nosebleed, if you do have access to an ice pack or anything cold, is to put this ice pack on your nose or cheek area, allowing the cold to constrict the blood vessels around your nose, further slowing the bleeding. Or if you don't have access to cold, what you could try to do is just take deep, slow breaths to help the clotting form faster. But speaking of clotting, one thing you definitely don't want to do is shove stuff up your nose. Even if you think that shoving something up your nose will help stop the bleeding, or if the bleeding stopped and you're just shoving something up there to prevent further bleeding, the reality in most cases is if you shove something up your nose while it's bleeding, you're only going to irritate the area more and very likely dislodge clotting, which basically restarts the entire healing process again. Unfortunately for your friend, you didn't have anything to shove up his nose, because if you did, you would have, and it would have only hurt him more. And with you and your bros blood-fueled fiasco over, you try to get some sleep because you know tomorrow's not going to be easy. You close your eyes and fall asleep in the cave and wake up to the feeling of something scratching you. You think your friend might be just poking your arm, and you open your eyes to realize that there are multiple tarantulas all over your body. Instantly, you book it out of the cave, throwing these tarantulas on the ground and stomping on them. With you and your friend now more awake than any coffee could get you, you decide it's time to continue your journey as you hope that you can find some civilization soon. Because unlike the first adventure that you and your bro took, this adventure was not planned, and you have no survival supplies on you. And if you're not able to find civilization soon, you guys are surely done for. As you both walk through the desert seemingly aimlessly, with vultures flying not too far behind you, almost foreshadowing your soon demise, your friend notices something in the distance. He begins to jump around and seem extremely enthusiastic, and you ask him, What do you see? And he tells you, look up there, there's a stream, there's a river, that's water. We can drink the water and we can also follow the stream to civilization. You are not nearly as enthusiastic as your friend because you know that your friend is simply hallucinating or seeing a mirage. There's no water anywhere near you guys, and you're very likely going to die in the next few hours. Your friend seems unwavering that there is in fact a stream above, and with you having nowhere better to go, you decide to follow him. And to your shock, he was right. There was a stream of water going directly through this desert, and you both were able to finally drink as much water as your heart desired. After you two felt sufficiently hydrated, you asked your friend, wait, what did you say back there about water leading to civilization? And he tells you that, yeah, everybody knows if you get lost, just follow water downstream and it is guaranteed to lead to some sort of civilization. And while he didn't have any sort of evidence to back up this claim, you really had nowhere else to go. So, wanting to stay close to your only source of water, you and your friend begin to follow this water downstream in the hopes of finding some sort of civilization. As you both follow the stream, you fortunately find yourselves out of the desert and back into the woods. However, these woods don't last long, and you find yourselves in a climate that's getting colder and colder. You think to yourself, what kind of Minecraft terrain generation is this? But you continue forward, and eventually this water you're following downstream leads to an ocean. And this is both good news and bad news. The good news, in the distance, you can actually see an island with buildings on it. You don't know where this is, but there's people there. But the bad news is, you are in an extremely cold climate now. And this island in the distance is definitely not within swimming distance, at least in your opinion. But your friend has another perspective on that. You talk to your friend and tell him that his water theory didn't work at all. It led us to an ocean. Although your friend maintains that because there was a city off in the distance, his theory was technically right. Although the truth of the matter is this: while some people believe that following water downstream will typically find you to civilization, that is not the case in most cases. Following a river downstream could take you to a city, or could take you into hazardous terrain that could put you once again in more danger. But that's basically a mini myth at this point, because you guys have so much more to worry about. Once again, focusing on the cold water in front of you in the city in the distance, your friend argues that while the city on the island is definitely far away, it's not out of swimming range. And even though the water is cold, we won't be swimming for long enough to actually catch hypothermia. And for that reason, our best bet is to swim to this island. Here's the deal. Up until this point, you followed your friend basically blindly through everything, but cold water is where you draw the line. line, and you tell your friend, there's absolutely no way I'm swimming through cold water to try to make it to this island. But your friend stubbornly remains firm that he's going to swim to this island whether you're coming or not. You dare your friend to try, and you watch him walk into this nearly freezing water, only for him to begin swimming quickly, and then slower and slower and slower until, well, he's basically drowning, and there's nothing either of you can do. Fortunately, out of sheer chance, a massive wave picks up your friend out of this cold water and brings him directly back to shore. And you are able to tell him, I told you so. And this is because this is a survival myth that you know the truth about. One of the most dangerous survival myths is that you can swim for hours in cold water before hypothermia sets in, giving you plenty of time to swim to safety if you're in cold water. However, while it may take some time for hypothermia to fully set in, it only takes seconds for cold water to put your body in a state of panic. And in some cases, as soon as you become exposed to cold water, you could be facing the immediate risk of the cold shock response, which is essentially just an involuntary gasp of air followed by rapid breathing. Now, if your face happens to go under the water at this time, or if a wave hits you in the face, you could choke on the water and potentially drown already. But even if you don't choke on water, if you're not able to get your breathing under control, you could panic and lose control within minutes and drown. But let's say if you're swimming in cold water and you're able to maintain your breath, that is only the first step. Because sure, your breathing is under control, but you are still in deadly waters. You might be able to tread water for now, but with the cold water surrounding your body, you only have roughly 10 to 30 minutes if you're lucky before your muscles and nerves begin to shut down and you can no longer have proper control of them, obviously eventually leading to drowning. But let's say that you're not treading water, you're holding onto something that's floating. Your chance of survival doesn't increase significantly because depending on how much time you're spending in the water, hypothermia is the final risk you face and possibly the deadliest of them all. Once your core body temperature begins to fall, mental confusion, sluggishness, and exhaustion sets in. And even though you're not physically exerting energy, your body is working on triple overtime just to maintain the warmth it has. And you could very easily lose all strength and let go of this one thing you're holding on to. A real survival tip surrounding cold waters is something known as the 1-10-1 rule. The first one in 1-10-1 stands for how much time you have to get your breathing under control. You have roughly 1 minute to get your breathing under control after first immersion in the water before you are set into a full panic. After this first minute of deep breathing, getting your breath under control, you have 10, which represents 10 minutes of meaningful movement before your muscles begin to weaken. So with this 10 minutes, it's best that you decide which direction you want to go if anything is even close by. For example, some floating debris or potentially an island or boat if you are so lucky. And the final one in 1-10-1 means 1 hour. And that's because it typically takes 1 hour before hypothermia leads to full unconsciousness. Meaning that if you're floating in cold water, you have roughly an hour before, well, things don't look good for you at all. And while you finish explaining this to your friend as he catches his breath from nearly drowning in this freezing water, you notice something on his leg. It's a pink squishy thing that's made his leg all red. It's a jellyfish. And you quickly grab a stick, stab the jellyfish, and throw it back in the water, only to notice that your friend now has a massive jellyfish sting on his leg. While your friend may be the most lucky and unlucky person in the world at this moment, things are about to get a lot more complicated. One, because in this situation, you actually know what you need to do, although you don't know if you have the strength to do it. As you sit there pondering on what your next move is, your friend looks you in the eyes and tells you, just do it. And you know what he means. You tell him to close his eyes, you whip out your lil bro, and you begin to urinate on his leg. Fortunately, you had a lot of urine to give because of the stream that you guys had followed. Although, unfortunately, this urination on the leg was not beneficial whatsoever. And it's once again another survival myth. It is a popular belief that the venom from a jellyfish sting can be neutralized with urine. However, in most cases, once again, the urine can actually make the sting worse. Depending on how bad the sting from the jellyfish was, the urine contacting the sting zone could actually cause the stinging cells on the skin to release more venom, which would further intensify the pain and speed up tissue damage from the venom from the sting. And in most cases, the best thing you can do when somebody has been stung by a jellyfish is to rinse the area carefully with either vinegar or salt water, which both can safely deactivate the stingers, and then you want to carefully remove the tentacles with tweezers or a stick, whatever you have. Interestingly, urine isn't the only thing you should avoid putting on a jellyfish sting, as fresh water should also be avoided, because it too can cause the stingers to fire. Now, obviously, the best case scenario is to go to the hospital immediately, but in a survival situation, you have to make do with what you have. And as you urinate on your friend's leg and his screams begin to get louder and louder, you notice another sound. A sound that sounds like cameras clicking and flashing. And then you notice an unforgettable sound, the sound of a boat horn. You look to your left and realize that the cruise ship that you're on only a few days ago is now going directly by you, and everybody on the cruise ship is taking pictures of you urinating on your friend. And while the passengers on the ship think that these are just two kinky people living off grid, the staff of the boat recognize that you two were the people that were lost in the helicopter crash. And for that reason, they send a rescue boat from the cruise ship to pick you both up and take you back to the cruise ship. Boarding the ship, you and your friend are both relieved to be alive and saved, but also stressed out because at this point, all you want to do is be home. In the first video about survival myths, you and your friend intentionally tried to go out and survive. Although this time, you and your friend were not looking for an adventure whatsoever. You guys were simply looking for a relaxing vacation. An adventure found you. And at this point in time, you're just scared that your horrible luck will continue in another episode. As the captain approaches your room to see how you guys are doing, you greet him, thank him for saving your life, and also tell him that the books that they provided on the ship were not helpful at all in survival situations. The captain takes the book out of your hand and laughs, telling you this isn't a book about survival situations. This is a parody book about everything you should not do in a survival situation. It's literally a joke. And also, if you turn the page, it tells you what you should actually do on the other side. Don't you boys know how to read? Embarrassed to tell the captain about your literacy, you just decide to laugh and tell him, oh, yeah, thanks. And as the captain is about to leave your room, he turns around and asks, wait, how did you guys even end up in the water in the first place? And with the captain being in the doorway, you decide that the best course of action is to close the door in his face and not answer that question. Because, well, you've dealt with enough punishment over the last few days. I think at this point, most people would agree that at its core, the ocean is simply a vessel for terror. The sheer size, anonymity, and emptiness of the ocean are reasons alone to be terrified of it. And quite frankly, it is the closest thing we have to a void on this planet. However, this void is not empty. And in this video, we are going to describe the craziest sea creatures that we know of at every depth of the ocean. Starting tame, but only getting creepier as we dive deeper into the ocean blue. The epipelagic zone. The epipelagic zone is also known as the sunlight zone, and that's because it's basically the only section of the ocean that receives ample sunlight. The epipelagic is only a measly 200 meters deep, and it's for that reason that part of the epipelagic zone is also known as the photic zone, because this is the only part of the ocean where photosynthesis can take place for ocean plants. For context, about 90% of the world's known marine animals live within the epipelagic zone. And for that reason, there is plenty of sea creatures to talk about. Although nothing as strange as the things we're going to get into in the deeper depths of this video. Now, interestingly, unrelated from sea creatures themselves, the epipelagic actually serves an important role on weather and climate by absorbing the energy from the sun, gradually releasing it over time, and even globally redistributing the energy as heat through the wind's effects on the ocean and ocean currents themselves. And this plays an important role in ecosystems, weather, and global climate as a whole. But enough about that dumb stuff. Let's get into the creepy critters that exist within this zone. As I mentioned, basically all of the marine life we know about lives in this zone. So the entries I could talk about are endless. I could mention basically any monster that's been on Jeremy Wade's River Monsters. I could discuss rare breeds of shark. I could even discuss Piranha 3DD. But even though the list of options is bountiful, this video is finite, which is why I boiled it down to a more known example. Just to start things off, relatively tame. This little guy may look like a rock, but he's actually a fish known as the stonefish. And he is both ugly and terrifying. And a little cool, but that's besides the point. As weird and alien as this fish may look, it's actually possibly the most normal looking fish on this entire list. While the stonefish may look like a deep sea creature, it actually hates the depth and lives typically only within 0 to 30 meters of the ocean's surface. And while they can be found in depths as deep as 50 meters, they are typically never found in depths beyond that, making them a, relatively speaking, shallow fish. And that theory is also kind of bolstered by the fact that stonefish only date rich people, which in my opinion is quite shallow. But gold digging aside, the stonefish has some rather unique attributes that made it worthy of this list. Besides the obvious, looking weird, or at least like a stone. For starters, the stonefish has a rather unique natural camouflage that it uses to its advantage. The stonefish is typically found in rocky seabeds, coral reefs, or in shallow lagoons, and in these locations, it will nestle its body as deeply as it can into or onto the surface and then cover the rest of its body either in sand or mud to blend in as much as it can with the environment, leaving only its back exposed. And when the stonefish is in its hidden position, it is pretty convincing. And this is bad for a few reasons, most notably for people. Because while the stonefish could live anywhere from 0 to 50 meters below the ocean surface, they are most frequently seen by people in very shallow, low tide zones and near reef flats. And you know which other animal likes very shallow, low tide reef flats? Humans on vacations with snorkels. And when a hidden stonefish encounters an unassuming tourist, things get a lot worse than just being creeped out. And while looking like this and living under a rock may be creepy enough, the third and final attribute about the stonefish is by far what makes it most notable and terrifying. The reason why the stonefish purposely leaves its back exposed when it is hiding is because its back contains 13 razor-sharp dorsal fin spines, and they are full of the most potent fish toxin in the world. Now, you might be asking yourself, how do people get stung or stabbed? And the truth is, the stonefish is basically a booby trap. And that's because when a stonefish is stepped on or has pressure applied to its back, the skin that is sheathing the spines is pushed down the spine, exposing the needle-like spine, allowing it to penetrate whatever is applying pressure to it. And when I say needle-like, I mean it. Not only is the spine extremely sharp, it is also basically a hollow tube, and it uses that tube to deliver the toxin directly into your muscles, skin, fat, whatever is touching it. And once contact has been made and the toxin is now within you, the real party starts. Immediately after you are stung by the stonefish, you are met with a sense of intense burning, followed by a plethora of potential symptoms, including, but not limited to, nausea, vomiting, fever, muscle spasms, hypertension, and in some cases, seizures and even death. If you happen to be stung by a stonefish, your best course of action is to submerge the area that's been affected in hot water, as hot as you can tolerate, for 30 to 90 minutes to allow the heat-liable protein to break down. In most cases, this is enough to subside the sting, but in severe cases, anti-venom is also available, if you can get it. Now, if you're one of those people that are saying, well, I can just avoid this because I'll just stay out of the water. Easy. Not so fast. The stonefish can actually live for up to 24 hours out of water, meaning that if you're just on a beautiful beach and happen to see a weird-looking stone, you may also end up with a very bad stonefish sting on land. But yeah, the stonefish is crazy and creepy and scary enough, but we are only just getting started. And we're still in a part of the ocean where the sun does in fact shine. So with that, let's move on. The mesopelagic zone. The mesopelagic zone is also known as the twilight zone, and that's because this is the part of the ocean where vampires live. Jokes aside, it's called the twilight zone because this is where light goes to die. The twilight zone of the ocean ranges from 200 meters in depth to 1,000 meters in depth, meaning there's quite a bit of variation in light distribution in this zone, as well as a lot more ocean to discuss. Some sunlight is visible at the top of the mesopelagic or twilight zone. However, one distinct characteristic of the twilight zone is the lack of conditions that allow for photosynthesis, meaning no plants, no phytoplankton, no vampires, I guess. And for fish and marine creatures, this means that life just got a lot more complicated. And gross. And I'm not just talking about how these fish look. If you look at the footage on screen right now of the twilight zone, obviously while illuminated by the camera, you almost see these particles that look like snow floating around. And this phenomenon is literally known as marine snow. And it consists basically solely of organic matter from the previous ocean layer. And by organic particles, of course, I mean fecal pellets and dead material, aka fish poop and dead fish parts. And while just being surrounded by death and poop might sound bad enough, believe it or not, in the twilight zone, for many fish, it's this consistent poop snow that actually facilitates life. Because this, for many fish, is their source of sustenance. So if you were curious what a creature would look like that never saw sunlight and had a diet almost exclusively of poo, well, you're about to find out very soon. The mesopelagic zone is also the first zone of the ocean that is considered deep sea. And with that comes, of course, deep sea creatures. Possibly some of the most horrifying things roaming this planet. In the first section, I only gave one example. But for this section, I want to discuss a few more cuddly, creepy creatures, because this is where things really begin to get juicy. One of the biggest general genres of fish that exist in the twilight zone can best be explained as gelatinous zooplankton. And they come in many different shapes and sizes, some examples on screen now. And the common denominator amongst all of them is that they are basically at the will of the ocean's currents. They have no way of moving around, and they just move where the ocean pushes them and eat what they can. One specific type of deep sea creature that has a similar method of movement and also a similar look, but is not the same whatsoever, is a type of creature known as a siphonophore. And put as simply as possible, siphonophores are extremely complex creatures that, while they look like one creature, they are actually a colony of organisms that are reliant and dependent on each other, all living in the body of one organism, essentially. Siphonophores are for the most part considered zooids, and zooids are multicellular units that all develop from a single fertilized egg, and from that egg combine to create a functional colony that then reproduces with itself and continues to grow and grow. And because of this, siphonophores have been able to grow to crazy lengths. And there's even been a recorded siphonophore that was up to 50 meters long, making it the longest recorded animal on this planet ever seen. Longer than a blue whale, longer than, well, anything. And while siphonophores may just look like passive drifters, they are actually predatory carnivores, meaning that they are intentionally hunting, or it, I don't even know what to call it, because it's basically a conjoined twin that has, well, 20 to infinity twins all combined to each other. Because although this is a colony of different organisms, all of these organisms are genetically identical, making it kind of hard to categorize. And the scientific literature on siphonophores is complex to say the least. Like, just imagine, instead of you having your body, each one of your organisms was technically a separate organism working together, which I guess is technically the case. But in the case of siphonophores, that is what they are. Every zooid that makes up a siphonophore is genetically identical, but each individual zooid, or part of the siphonophore, basically has a specialized function, kind of like organs in our body. Some of the zooids in the siphonophores sting, some digest, some do nothing, and some even have bioluminescence, making them glow in the deep sea environment, which is a pretty common characteristic at this depth. But yeah, siphonophores are a bizarre collection of organisms that make one organism, and each part of the organism does its own specialized task. And while that alone is interesting, it's impossible to deny that siphonophores look extremely creepy, and the fact that they can get up to 50 plus meters long is nothing short of terrifying, especially when you consider that they are predatory hunters, not just passive beings. But taking a break from the jelly boys, we also have some more truly terrifying creatures to discuss. For starters, this guy. Sorry for the jump scare. This is the snipe eel, and it can grow up to 1 to 2 meters long, which is just lovely, isn't it? The most notable characteristic of the snipe eel is its jaw. It's very skinny and almost needle-like. And in most cases, the upper jaw curves upward and the lower jaw may either stay straight or even curve downward as well. The reason why the snipe eel is called the snipe eel is because its jaw represents the beak of the bird with the same name, the snipe. And snipe eels themselves are also carnivorous hunters. And this is what an X-ray looks like. But in case that wasn't scary enough, this is the dragonfish. And I apologize for the second jump scare. The dragonfish, interestingly, could kind of live in most deep sea parts of the ocean, and they have been found anywhere from 500 meters deep to 5,000 meters deep. But I wanted to talk about them now because they are scary, and I want scary now. Fortunately, unlike the snipe eel, the dragonfish is relatively small. They can be anywhere from 6 to 10 inches, which, if you ask me, is way too big. And they are expert predators. They have enormous jaws that are filled with razor-sharp teeth, and they also have a rather unique upper jaw that allows them to open their mouth more than 100 degrees, which, similar to a snake, allows them to consume extremely large prey. Prey so big, in fact, that it is literally 50% bigger than they are, which almost doesn't make sense, so I'm assuming they're like stretchy, which to me only makes it worse. Scary and stretchy are not a good mix. Sexy and stretchy, that's a different story. Just look at Mrs. Incredible. But putting that aside for now, let's next discuss the goblin shark, another disgusting looking deep sea creature. The goblin shark is a very rare type of shark that only lives in the deep sea, and in some cases it is even called a living fossil because it is the last remaining relative of a family of sharks that have a lineage that date back over 125 million years. And honestly, I believe it, because this shark literally looks like something that was still in pre-development and was dropped way too early. It's basically an EA game, but that's beyond the point. The goblin shark is also pink and 3 to 4 meters long. And if the pictures weren't obvious enough, the goblin shark's creepy claim to fame is its flat, pointed out snout and its unusual looking jaw that it will shoot out of its mouth when it's feeding. And I think it goes without saying that the goblin shark is of course a carnivorous predator. It is also something I would never want to see in person. One cool fact about them though is the fact that their snout is covered in electroreceptors that sense minute electric fields produced by nearby fish. And it's that attribute of their snout that allows them to be effective deep sea hunters in very low light environments when they are essentially moving off feel. But quickly, before we move on to the next depth of the ocean, I quickly wanted to give a bit of a palate cleanse and also talk about something that's not so creepy but also more so cool before we get really creepy. And this is a creature known as the blood belly comb jelly. This fish is actually known as nature's disco ball because of how the bioluminescence on it works. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to a cool deep sea creature that I learned about while researching for this video. But let's move on. The bathypelagic zone. The bathypelagic zone is also known as the midnight zone, and that is because at this point in the ocean, it is pitch black top to bottom. And when I say top to bottom, I mean it because this part of the ocean is vast. It ranges from 1,000 meters deep to 4,000 meters deep. That is literally 4 kilometers deep into the ocean, making it 4 times bigger and 4 times deeper than the Twilight Zone we just discussed, which in itself already had some extremely creepy creatures. But at the bathypelagic zone and beyond, it only gets weirder. For context, the bathypelagic zone is so deep, in fact, that massive factors like the sun, waves, or tides have basically little to no impact on life in this area, making it, like I mentioned earlier, essentially a void. No light, no sound, only immense pressure and loneliness. And it's because this part of the ocean is so isolated and so unaffected by other factors that it's believed that this part of the ocean has remained relatively similar for the past millions of years, meaning that the bathypelagic zone could be one of our only direct windows into prehistoric life that still exists today, which admittedly is pretty cool. I think that this is an important time to state that the deeper we go in this video, the less that we know about that specific area. And that's simply because the pressures at these depths are immense. And for that reason, knowledge, research, and even time spent at these depths is extremely limited. Each deeper level of the ocean only becomes more mysterious and elusive and unknown than the last, which is why I'm once again mentioning that the creatures I'm listing are only the creatures that we're aware of. And at the depths we're now exploring, there's a very good chance that there is a lot of crazy, creepy creatures we have no idea about. But let's discuss the ones we do know about, starting with this monstrosity, known as the Greenland shark. And these sharks are no ordinary sharks by any means. For starters, they are known to live for centuries, typically anywhere from 200 to 500 years old, making it the longest living vertebrate on Earth. But it's not only the lifespan of this shark that is long, it physically is also massive. And that's because it suffers from a condition that is common this deep in the ocean, a condition known as deep sea gigantism. And it's a relatively common occurrence this deep in the water. And it also makes creatures at this depth multiples larger than their more shallow counterparts. And the Greenland shark specifically regularly grows bigger than great white sharks, with the capacity to grow up to 7 meters or even beyond. Which to me is super interesting. It almost seems counterintuitive, because if you are a creature that is living in a place where food is so scarce, and you're also living in an environment that has such immense pressure, it would seem like the opposite effect would happen. You know, creatures would get smaller, not have the tendency to get gigantic. But that's beyond the point. Sharks that live at this depth live very different lives than sharks in shallower waters, and that's specifically because food is scarce, there is no light, and for that reason, hunting styles are completely different. The Greenland shark, for example, much like many predators at this depth in the ocean, uses a sit and wait tactic to conserve energy. They don't swim quickly or much at all, and it is really their laziness that is part of their survival, which is a direct page out of Roderick's Tips for Life if you really think about it. But moving on to our next creature, we have a classic, the anglerfish. Many people know the look, but not many people know the lore. Anglerfish famously have a bioluminescent lore on the front of their face. This lore actually contains bacteria that is bioluminescent, and it uses its bioluminescence to attract prey in the deep waters. Anglerfish also have massive mouths that they can open to extreme widths to swallow nearly any prey it finds, and it can also stretch its entire body to consume prey that is twice its size, which is a requirement for living at a place where food is so scarce. You have to be able to eat anything and everything you find. We all know that anglerfish look terrifying, but one of the freakiest things about the anglerfish is, well, how it gets freaky. It is so uncommon for two anglerfish to meet up at deep sea depths that male anglerfish have actually evolved to essentially just become female ball sacks. And I'm not even kidding. Every anglerfish you've ever seen with a bioluminescent lure is a female. Male anglerfish have no bioluminescent bulb, they are tiny, but they do have massive eyes and large nostrils, both specifically to help them seek out and find female anglerfish. Once a male anglerfish is able to find a female anglerfish, the male anglerfish will use pincers in its jaw to attach to the female anglerfish, and once it is fully attached, it will live there for the rest of its life. Not only living off of the female, but becoming essentially part of the female. Once the male is attached to the female, they combine their circulatory systems, and the male's body goes from being tiny to non-existent and shrivels up into a ball sack. And the entire purpose of this ball sack is to provide the female anglerfish with sperm to reproduce. And the shriveled sack that was once the male anglerfish is just balls that is living off of her blood and food. That entire process is crazy for multiple reasons. Primarily because men literally have no other purpose than to try to hunt down and become part of the women, but it's also crazy to see how nature always finds a way. And if you really think about it, male anglerfish might be the most dedicated stay-at-home dads. The abyssopelagic zone. The abyssopelagic zone is exactly as it sounds. It's an abyss and ranges from 4,000 to 6,000 meters deep. It continues the trend of being a dark, barren wasteland. And for many parts in the ocean, the abyssopelagic zone is the deepest depth the ocean gets to, meaning that it includes many creatures that live on the ocean floor. And it's also important to note that the ocean floor is one of the most plentiful ecosystems in the entire world. There is more ocean floor than there is forests, deserts, and mountains combined. And with how plentiful this ecosystem is, there is not a shortage of creepy crawlers, with one literal example being the giant sea spider. Giant and spider are two words you never want in the same sentence, and somehow deep sea only makes it worse. Interestingly, the giant deep sea spider kind of varies in size, and some regular sea spiders can be as small as a grain of sand, and some giant ones can be as large as a house cat. Regardless, they both conduct the same hobbies. They both crawl along the sandy ocean floor, and they both prey on soft-bodied animals, using its straw-like limbs to stab into its victims, and suck their nutrients and literal insides out of their body and into the spider. The largest types of sea spiders live at the North and South Pole, and not only experience deep-sea gigantism, but also polar gigantism, another strange deep-sea phenomenon that scientists don't yet understand. Interestingly, sea spiders are typically considered parasites and not predators, and that's because when they feed on these soft-bodied creatures that they stab their legs into and suck the life out of, they don't always kill their prey. They'll just suck what they want and then go on with it, not really caring if their victim lives or dies. Oh, and these sea spiders don't only use their legs to stab into their prey, they also use their legs to breathe, with the entirety of their legs being filled on the inside with intestinal pouches that are used to absorb oxygen through the legs' tubes, basically utilizing most of the spider's surface area, which is, of course, its legs. If you're like me and don't like spiders on land, then I'm sure you're pleased to know that they only get worse at the ocean floor, meaning that maybe we don't have it so bad up here after all. But in case giant sea spiders weren't bad enough, what about giant sea squids that basically look like spiders? I'm talking about the big fin squid, possibly one of the scariest looking creatures on this entire list. The first ever big fin squid sighting was in 1988. And since then, there have only been about 20 recorded sightings, making this creature exceedingly rare. However, out of the ones that have been seen and documented, the longest big fin squid that we know of was more than 20 feet long. But because we know about deep sea gigantism and of course polar gigantism, it is very likely that much larger big fin squid are out there that we just haven't seen yet. Scientists believe that the big fin squid uses its tentacles like a web to catch its prey, or will drag its tentacles across the ocean floor to try to scoop up prey almost like a net. However, neither of these are fully confirmed. And such is the case for most of the information about the big fin squid because sightings have been so few and far between, and those sightings have been short-lived, meaning that while we know this creature exists, very little about them is known. In my opinion, making them that much more terrifying. As if their whole alien look wasn't bad enough. Like, I swear that every horror movie that has an apocalyptic giant creature that ends the world, it looks like this thing. And it turns out we don't even need horror movies. We just need something that already exists at the bottom of the ocean. The hadopelagic zone. The hadopelagic zone is the final frontier when it comes to Earth's oceans. It exists in depths from 6,000 meters to 11,000 meters, which, of course, is the deepest depth on the entire Earth. and is located in the Marianas Trench. The hadopelagic zone consists almost solely of trenches, and at the very bottom of the hadopelagic zone, there have been less people than there has been on the surface of the moon, meaning that this area is extremely unexplored and extremely unknown. The pressure in this zone of the ocean is more than 800 times greater than it is on the surface of the Earth. However, stunningly, life still finds a way to exist, seemingly against all odds. And I say this because for the longest time, scientists believed that it was simply impossible for life to exist in such a cold, dark, and high-pressure environment. But when researchers and scientists were finally able to make the expedition to these extremely deep depths, they were met not with nothing, but with life. One of the most notable examples is the snailfish. And interestingly, at least in my opinion, the snailfish is one of the least creepy entries on this entire list. But at this point in the video, I'm going to give them the pass, partially because I'm kind of over forcing a negative bias when in reality, all of this is so fascinating and amazing, but also because the sheer fact that they even exist in a place where an armored tank would implode in itself and a human would instantly die is shocking enough and qualifies them to be an entry on this list, because it's creepy and crazy how this creature is even able to exist. It makes you wonder and think, if creatures could live at the bottom of their ocean, where else could creatures and animals be that we aren't aware of? Potentially looking up, not down. But that's a different video. Focusing back in on the snailfish have a gelatinous, scaleless body that almost looks delicate and jello-like. And that is by design. Their soft structure is what allows them to live at such immense depths. And these fish, for that reason, don't even have bones. They simply have cartilage-like structures that have been adapted to this pressure. Like many other creatures at this depth, the snailfish has skin that is almost entirely transparent. And while they may look almost kind of cute, the snailfish is also a predator and uses a suction feeding method to catch prey that is either walking on or hiding in the soft sediment on the bottom of these trenches. But like some of the other creatures we've discussed, it's the lack of time and experience we've been able to have with these creatures that leave us once again with a limited knowledge. But if nothing else, the sheer existence of the snailfish just goes to show that life always finds a way. And even when scientists are convinced that something is impossible or that life simply could not live in a certain place, life just ends up there. Further proving that whoever created all of this has a sense of humor, or at least loves irony. And I believe the ocean is kind of a reflection of that thought. Somehow, in places with no food and high pressure, creatures get bigger. And somehow, in places with no light, fish are able to create light. The ocean is truly mysterious, creepy, and if we're being honest, kind of amazing. Crazy mysteries that were solved by the internet. Mysterious messages. The date is April 15th, and you have just woken up to the sound of your alarm. As per usual, you only open your eyes a sliver and roll over to hit the snooze button. But it's as you turn over to notice something. On the desk beside your bed is a post-it note. Something you don't remember writing or leaving for yourself. And even though you're in desperate need of sleep, you decided to investigate. The yellow post-it note wasn't creepy in nature. It was a list of errands you had to do. But one crucial detail made it extremely mysterious. The handwriting on the note was not your own. It was that one subtle detail that caused you to think about how that post-it note could have possibly appeared. You have no recollection of writing it, but who else would know what errands you need to run? And besides, even if somebody did know, how would they have written the note and gotten it in your bedroom? It really didn't make much sense, but it didn't bother you that much. You chalk it up as something you did in your sleep and go on with your day, nearly forgetting about it hours later. That was until 4 days later on April 19th. After arriving home from work on the 19th, you notice something on the back of your office chair. Once again, another yellow post-it note, although this one was a bit more cryptic. It was in the same mysterious handwriting as the previous note, but it wasn't a list of errands. It was a reminder telling you to make sure you saved your documents. This note was more than odd and made you seriously question what exactly was going on, and it was becoming obvious this wasn't a note you had just written in your sleep. This note freaked you out so much in fact that you decided to set up a webcam inside of your apartment, pointing it directly at your desk to ensure that whoever or whatever was writing these notes could be caught. And once the camera was in place, nothing happened. That was until 9 days later. On the morning of the 28th, you woke up once again and found the most cryptic and disturbing note of all. It was a post-it note once again on your desk that stated the following: "Our landlord isn't letting me talk to you, but it's important we do." Immediately, you begin to check the folder in which the webcam was saving all of the footage, and you notice that it was not only no longer recording, but all of the footage had been manually deleted. At this point, you were terrified. Somebody was leaving you cryptic messages, deleting the evidence, and you have no evidence besides these notes that anybody has been in or around your apartment. You know you're not doing it yourself, and you're beginning to feel like you're losing your mind. And on top of this, you're starting to develop worse and worse headaches, likely due to the stress of what is going on. A few days after that incident, on the 1st of May, you find another post-it note, although this time not on your desk. It's actually on the outside of your front door. And as you look down the hallway of all the other apartments, you notice that almost every door has a different colored post-it note, seemingly at random, although the deeper meaning, if there was one, was lost to you. After nearly 2 weeks of cryptic torment, you come to the conclusion that the person that's doing this has to be your landlord. But just to be sure, you check the lease agreement you signed and notice that the handwriting of your landlord on his signature almost matches the writing in your sticky notes exactly, proving to you that your landlord had been not only sneaking into your apartment, but using your sticky pads and using your pen to write you cryptic notes. Feeling terrified, violated, and slightly relieved now that you have some answers, you decide to go to Reddit, specifically the legal advice subreddit, to ask the members of the community if you had any legal standing to potentially press charges against your landlord. You had no evidence besides the notes themselves, but you figured the evidence would be enough. However, after making your post to Reddit, the community quickly determines that you don't have a legal situation on your hands. You actually have something much darker going on. The story I just described is the exact experience that Reddit user R. Bradbury1920 experienced over a decade ago. After Bradbury made the post, people quickly began to start weighing in on exactly what could be going on. One commenter suggested installing another lock on the door that could only be unlocked from the inside to see if it was truly the landlord. Some people believed that this story was completely bogus and just a waste of time. And others suggested that Bradbury see a doctor immediately because it seemed like he was having some sort of mental or neurological problem that he was not aware of and that needed to be treated immediately. And while all of these theories or possibilities had their own validity, it wasn't until one user did a deeper dive on Bradbury's Reddit profile that he found crucial information. A comment by Reddit user Kakerlak affirmed the possibility that this could have been a landlord break-in, a sleepwalking situation, or even a mental health issue. However, they did also propose that this could have been a physical problem as well. While trying to determine the authenticity of Bradbury's post, Kakerlak decided to do some digging on Bradbury's Reddit profile, and noticed that in some older posts where he was asking for interior design advice, Bradbury specifically stated that he had an unusually narrow bedroom with no windows. And it was that piece of information that led Kakerlak to believe that the situation may have been caused by this unusual and unsafe bedroom. Kakerlak stated in his comment, quote, "There's a good chance you are not getting enough ventilation when you sleep, or that there is a carbon monoxide leak in the building. A cheap carbon monoxide detector is the fastest way to find out. You'll also get really bad headaches if that's the case. You know your own medical history and mental health history and your experiences. If you think these incidents might be you writing yourself notes, there's no shame in getting somebody qualified to give you an opinion." The comment seemed straightforward and respectful enough, although his discovery and theory about his bedroom turned out to be a lot more significant than he could have ever assumed. And that's because, following this comment being made, Bradbury replied to his comment, stating, "I have had really bad headaches, and I actually do have a carbon monoxide detector. I should probably take it out of the box and plug it in." And it was with that suggestion from a stranger on Reddit that Bradbury opened his carbon monoxide sensor, put in a battery, and instantly it was going off like a smoke alarm, proving that Bradbury's bedroom had a dangerous amount of carbon monoxide in it, and was very much so the cause of the mystery at play. In case you're unfamiliar, carbon monoxide is a poisonous and deadly gas that cannot easily be detected by humans. Prolonged exposure to carbon monoxide could cause hallucinations, memory loss, and general mental decline. And it turns out, because of the windowless bedroom that Bradbury was sleeping in, every night he was getting acute carbon monoxide poisoning. And in that oxygen-deprived state, he would be leaving these notes, forgetting he wrote them, and waking up to a complete mystery. The stranger who took the time to look into Bradbury's profile not only ended up solving his mystery, but also very likely saved his life. 11BX 1371. It was a warm summer night in 2015. You and your best bro were surfing the web looking for something spooky. You started the night by reading no-sleep stories and then went to YouTube to listen to creepypastas. But it was after your unsatisfying creepy story binge that a creepy video just happened to find you. It was a YouTube video titled 11BX 1371. And the thumbnail intrigued you. It was a guy in a plague doctor's mask in what looked to be an abandoned building. So you and your bro decided to click on it and watch the full 2 minutes. The video itself was vague and creepy, and it was for that reason that to you and your bro, it was absolute nightmare fuel. After watching the video, you're left with more questions than answers. And after completing the video, you try to find any sort of information you can, hoping to try to disprove or get to the bottom of what this video is all about. But unfortunately, at the time, you and your bro can only find information about where this video came from. And according to a 4chan article from only a few days ago, somebody simply found this video on a park bench and uploaded it to try to share it to see if anybody knew anything about it. But beyond that, no more information was available, and the mystery left you and your bro terrified. Shortly after reaching this dead end, you and your bro decide to get some sleep and try not to have nightmares about whatever you just watched. And it wouldn't be for many years to come that an answer would finally be provided on what this video is all about or what it even meant in the first place. 11BX1371 is one of the most interesting and, at this point, notorious internet mysteries. But fortunately, now that we are 11 years out from the original posting of the video, we have all of the answers. Even just at face value, this video is extremely creepy and cryptic in nature. Although, as it began to gain traction on both 4chan and YouTube, internet sleuths began to realize that this video wasn't just creepy. It was literally full of ciphers that were begging to be decoded. And it was with the discovery of these ciphers that online sleuths began to coordinate, create a community, and begin decoding them one by one. Some of the ciphers hidden in the video included hand signals, random shapes, cryptic texts, and symbols hidden in the background in spray paint. But of course, with internet sleuths being internet sleuths, people weren't only trying to discover what these ciphers meant, they were also trying to discover where this video took place and who took it. Some of the earliest decoded ciphers to come out of this video actually revealed the filming location of this video and secret graphic images hidden within the video's audio files. One Reddit user was able to discover that this video actually took place in an abandoned Polish psychiatric hospital. And another Reddit user discovered that the audio from this video, when put through a spectrogram, actually revealed graphic images of crime scenes and murder, giving this creepy video a whole new horrific angle. But it only gets darker. As Reddit detectives began to dig deeper and deeper into the audio files, they noticed that hidden in the audio, there was voices repeating the phrase, "We are the antivirus." But secrets weren't only hidden in the audio. Other Redditors were able to create a composite image of different frames taken from the video to spell out another cryptic message that stated, "Strike an arrow through the heart of the eagle." Another cryptic message that was about to take on a much deeper meaning. As other Redditors discovered that in the background of the video was Morse code that, when translated properly, literally meant "kill the president." And having that metaphor follow the striking an eagle with an arrow, some users suspected that this video was actually an omission to potentially assassinate the President of the United States, something that people reasonably took seriously. And this thesis was further backed that another cipher in the video, when decoded, literally translated to the GPS coordinates of the White House, making the plan seem that much more real and the video that much more terrifying. And while some people took these claims extremely seriously, it is not publicly known whether or not law enforcement agencies were actively looking into this potential threat against the American government, people, and president. It would be months until there was any other hints discovered on what this video could possibly mean, when seemingly out of the blue, a brand new YouTube channel named Parker Warner Wright would re-upload the now infamous video and also create a Twitter account and a Reddit account under the same name. And this Parker Wright individual was using these platforms to claim ownership of this now infamous video. Up until this point, as this video was gaining popularity, numerous people online were trying to claim ownership of it, saying that it was their personal project. However, nobody was able to prove the claim. That was until Parker Wright made these profiles and began answering questions and providing evidence that he was the original creator of this cryptic and terrifying video. He provided individuals online pictures of the mask used in the video, which he claimed to be custom made, meaning nobody else could possibly have it. He showed pictures of the gloves featured in the video, and even shared source files with some of the ciphers hidden in the video itself, making a rather rock-solid claim that Parker Wright was the original creator of this extremely mysterious video. However, after becoming pretty well known within the community of people trying to decode the first video, Parker decided to make a second video to prove once and for all that he was the original creator and that he planned on making more content like the first video. The video was titled 11B31369 and featured the same character in a similar setting doing similar things, further solidifying the case that Parker Wright was the original creator of the video. However, now that we knew what some of the ciphers meant, where the video took place, and now who took the video, what did it all mean? Unfortunately, an answer wasn't far away, because after the second video was posted, Parker made a Patreon of all things, and then made it known that these videos and this entire online persona he was now creating was part of a personal art project. Unsurprisingly, the reveal was a bit unsatisfactory for some individuals. as they had spent numerous hours trying to decipher codes that they believed to be of high relevance and importance to national security in the United States, while others were simply happy to be a part of the journey and were also relieved that there was no actual risk at play. Although the threats in this art could still very much be taken seriously. But yeah, what started as an early viral cryptic video that quickly gained the attentions of online cipher crackers and Reddit detectives quickly devolved into the original creator trying to cash in on the hype he created and promoting his Patreon. Which, honestly, artists need to get paid, so I get it. But it's interesting to consider where the line needs to be drawn between art and, well, making threats and sharing extremely graphic, disturbing content to unsuspecting online sleuths. I'm honestly kind of surprised this guy didn't get in trouble, considering there's a pretty big community actively looking into what this video is about. And before it was revealed that this was an art project, there was literally just mysterious threats being made against the American president. But now that the dust has settled, my assumption is that he was able to avoid getting in trouble simply because he revealed his true intentions not too long after the video gained traction, and he was also an American individual who was living in Poland, meaning that intelligence agencies didn't really have a direct path of getting to Parker, if they were even looking into this. But who knows? Let's move on. I feel fantastic. It's 2 a.m. and you have to wake up early, but of course you choose to not go to sleep and continue scrolling on YouTube. That is, until you're met with an extremely cryptic looking video. The thumbnail shows a humanoid looking creature, and the title simply says, "I feel fantastic." Already being creeped out by the thumbnail and title, you decide to scroll past it, but almost suddenly you know that this is something you have to look into. So you decide to scroll back up and see what this video is all about. You click on the video and are met with an extremely disturbing video, to say the least. What appears to be a humanoid robot singing a rather simple song. The video is short, and before you can even realize what you're watching, it's over. You decide that this nightmare fuel has already prevented you from getting a good night's sleep, so you decide to get out of bed, go to your desk, and begin researching on what this video could possibly be about, and what it could possibly mean. And some of the theories you're met with once you begin searching make you wish you never looked deeper into it at all. The I Feel Fantastic video features a robot named Terra. And if you were on early YouTube around 2009, you have very likely seen this extremely creepy video. But even if you weren't on YouTube at the time and didn't see the original video, I'm sure the character shown in this video is something you've seen if you've ever watched a YouTube iceberg video, or potentially something about lost media, or even a video about creepy solved internet mysteries. This I Feel Fantastic video has become rather notorious, and so has this Terra robot creature. But not many people know the full lore, which is why I wanted to discuss it further. Because this story, similar to the one we just discussed, produced some extremely serious and unsettling theories, although ended up being completely different than what everybody thought. In 2009, a video was uploaded to the YouTube channel Creepy Blog that was titled I Feel Fantastic. And it was that video that kicked off the entire mystery surrounding this uncanny character and video. Like the other video we discussed, the I Feel Fantastic video quickly began gaining attention in niche communities, specifically groups of people that felt enamored by the video and wanted to get to the bottom of it. The only hints on the possible purpose of this video were the description. And the description of this video was basically a monologue about Greek mythology and a tale of a Greek god trying to build his ideal woman. Something that didn't shed a ton of light but gave possible motivations. As people began to look further and further into this video, conspiracy theories began to arise, as they always do online. And one of the most prominent and shocking conspiracy theories was the theory that this video was actually an omission of murder, and that this creepy, uncanny mannequin was actually wearing the clothes of the killer's last victim. As other videos surfaced of this same robot wearing other ladies' clothes, it was then assumed that there was new victims and that these murders were actively happening. And when one video was discovered of a simple shot of a backyard, some people instantly assumed that this had to be the location where bodies were buried or where murders took place. But fortunately, these theories did not live long, as once again, internet detectives were able to get to the bottom of what was really going on here. And what was discovered was early 2000s Android forums, a place where people who were passionate about, well, humanoid androids could discuss their craft and passion. On one of these old forums, it was discovered that Tom Bergeron was an active community member, and he was frequently discussing his latest project, Terra the robot. And it was fortunately discovered that no, Terra was not simply modeling the clothes of dead victims. Terra was a project that Tom was working on, a project that he believed to be the future of entertainment. See, Terra the robot was Tom Bergeron's pride and joy. And the goal with his singing robot was to essentially create animatronic artists for concerts worldwide. Kind of like Five Nights at Freddy's, just even creepier. But yeah, while one cryptic video posted to YouTube can spark a lot of conspiracy and controversy, in reality, or at least in the case of Tara the Robot and I Feel Fantastic, the music video, all this really was at its core was a man trying to showcase his engineering prowess and demonstrate how animatronics could potentially look in entertainment in the near future. And while we don't know what John Bergeron is up to these days, I think it's safe to say that regardless of what he's doing now, his contribution to the Android space has definitely made an impact on the internet, albeit likely not in the way that he intended. Honestly, it's kind of funny to just imagine, you put your blood, sweat, and tears into something. You're so passionate about something. You think this business is the future. You create a prototype. You post it online to show the world. And the instant response is, oh my God, he's a killer. He's a killer. It's scary. He's a killer. Look at this. It's a monster. I mean, realistically, with how creepy it is, that's not an unreasonable reaction. But it's hilarious to think that this guy was trying to share his passion and everybody instantly thought he was a killer with malice intentions. Lily Peters. Lily Peters was a 10-year-old girl from Wisconsin. She lived a normal, happy, healthy life. That was until April of 2022, exactly 4 years ago to the month of recording this video. During this time, Lily was spending time at her aunt's house, something she did often. And as it was coming time to leave, Lily got on her bike and started to head home. Although when Lily didn't arrive home nearly an hour after she typically got home, her parents got concerned. Lily's dad ended up calling his sister, Lily's aunt, to see when Lily was going to head home. However, Lily's aunt informed her dad that she left an hour ago, which unsurprisingly caused panic in both the aunt and the father of Lily. Immediately after this discovery, Lily's dad began retracing Lily's possible steps, as there's not many places she could have gone or got lost. Lily's parents and her aunt only lived 3 minutes apart by bike, and this bike ride that Lily took was something she did often and was a safe route, meaning that there was nearly no logical explanation for why she would not be home on time or at all. And it was for that reason that Lily's parents decided to contact authorities once they were certain she wasn't lost or just simply taking her time getting home. After an official report was made on the missing child, police made a shocking discovery that night. They were able to locate Lily's bike, although it was abandoned and there was no sign of Lily anywhere. That was until the following morning, when during a routine search, one of the members on the search and rescue team found Lily Peters' lifeless body hidden in the woods. This discovery unfortunately confirmed the worst for everybody who knew and loved Lily, although this discovery only left more questions than answers. And that was because there was no clear motives for who could have done this and who would have wanted to do this. At the time of discovery, all the authorities knew was that they were dealing with a dead child who had been mutilated and dumped, seemingly for no reason, on a relatively short and routine bike ride. However, it wouldn't be long for the police to establish a motive and a timeline. Surprisingly, in part due to a Reddit comment from somebody who was playing Pokemon Go. As this tragic murder was beginning to make headlines across the nation, people began discussing the details on true crime subreddits and also tried their best to potentially theorize on what could be going on. It was in one of these true crime threads when a commenter claimed that they were playing Pokemon Go in the same area where the murder took place. And this player remembers seeing 2 children walking on the trails. And this player mentioned seeing a young girl that fit the exact description of Lily Peters. And the young boy that she was with ended up having a description that matched exactly with her 14-year-old cousin. Fortunately, this information was promptly reported to the local police department that was on the case, and it was actually that piece of information that gave the police enough evidence to arrest the 14-year-old boy they were already beginning to suspect. The 14-year-old boy, as I mentioned, was Lily Peters' 14-year-old cousin, and her cousin, of course, lived at the aunt's house she was just spending time at. It's been reported that when Lily was going to head home, her cousin offered to take the ride with her. She would ride her bike, and he would ride his hoverboard. Not long after they left their house, the 14-year-old boy suggested that they go to a nearby trail to play a bit more before she went home. And then once they made it to the trail, he suggested that they maybe go off-trail. And it was during this time off-trail that this 14-year-old boy assaulted, violated, and killed his 10-year-old baby cousin. After the 14-year-old was arrested, he not only admitted to everything that was done to Lily, but also admitted that what he did was premeditated and planned, proving that he had every intention of ending the life of his cousin before they ever even left the house. Because of the sheer depravity and seriousness of the situation, Lily's cousin, the 14-year-old killer, was convicted on multiple felony accounts of assault, rape, and murder as an adult. And his trial is actually set for this year. The story of Lily Phillips is by far the most tragic on this entire list. This wasn't an obscure art project or a gas leak. This was genuinely pure evil. and resulted in the loss of an innocent life that was completely avoidable. Truly, there are so many upsetting and disturbing details about the entire situation, and if you're into true crime, I'm sure you likely already know about it, but doing research for this video, I was truly just sickened to learn all of the details of the case, specifically about the family dynamic and how the cousin's dad was already in jail for, well, bad content of kids, if you get my drift. But yeah, it's just so crazy and upsetting to think that a 14-year-old boy could do something so depraved to his 10-year-old cousin. Regardless, the silver lining in the situation is the fact that Lily was soon found after she went missing, and justice was quickly served after the investigation was opened. Partially, in part, to a Reddit comment from somebody who was just playing Pokemon Go. I guess the moral of the story, at least in this section, is that if you see something, say something, because you really never know the impact it could have. In situations like this, I always like to remind myself and the audience that this is a real situation. A real life was lost, real families were impacted, and numerous people's lives were changed forever due to the actions of one individual. And for that reason, whenever I discuss murder or similar sensitive topics, I do my absolute best to be as respectful as possible. And I request you do the same if you end up discussing this section in the comments. It was a crisp January morning, and you were waking up at the ass crack of, well, 2 p.m. You see, it's January 1st, New Year's Day, and you spent the night previously getting wasted, and you have a massive hangover. Regardless, you promised yourself that you would make 2026 the best year of your life. No more messing around, no more junk food, no more glitches. All you wanted to do this year was lock in. Although, unfortunately, this year was about to be full of glitches and, well, not locking in whatsoever. Despite your head pounding and stomach feeling upside down, you decide to take a big stretch and get out of bed. But as you reach your arms above your head and bring them back down, you hit your elbow on your headboard and feel an electric shock go from the tip of your finger to the top of your shoulder. You are only seconds into consciously experiencing the new year, and you are already experiencing your first real-life glitch. You see, there are plenty parts of your body that if you bump it, it hurts. But for some reason, there are a few molecules specifically in your elbow that give you one of the most shocking pains that is both terrifying and extremely short-lived. And I know if you're watching this video, then you've definitely hit your funny bone at some point in your life. And statistically speaking, at least a few of you watching have done so today. But to anybody who's ever hit their funny bone, it's rather obvious that A, there's nothing funny about this experience, and B, the sensation you get from hitting your funny bone is unlike any other experience on your body. But yeah, we all kind of know what the funny bone experience is like, but not many of us know how this glitch even happens. And the reason why we have a funny bone is kind of unique. The funny bone is obviously not a bone at all. What's referred to as the funny bone is actually a small stretch of the ulnar nerve, which is closest to the skin in the elbow area. The ulnar nerve runs basically from your neck down to your hand. Now, interestingly, for the most part, the ulnar nerve in your forearm and upper arm is kind of protected by muscle and fat. However, when this nerve passes over your elbow close to the skin, it is at its most vulnerable. And what the ulnar nerve is vulnerable to is being compressed or bumped, both of which obviously can happen when you hit your elbow on something. While it may sound severe to have an electric shock shot through your body, and the fact that you have such a severe reaction to this bump, the reality is that this glitch is extremely normal and common, and like I mentioned, happens to basically everybody. And if you've ever bumped your elbow and thought that you broke something or had permanent nerve damage, then I have good news for you, because actually, that's not the case whatsoever. Hitting your funny bone is not a sign of nerve damage, and in the vast majority of cases is completely harmless, which is a W. And I wish I knew that when I was a paranoid little bro, scared that I broke my elbow, when in reality, I just hit the nerve at the wrong point. Now, while this electric shock going through your arm would be enough motivation for most people to finally get out of bed, your hangover is telling you that you could use just a few more minutes. And because you decide to start 2026 like a true grinder and hustle culture bro, you set an alarm for 1 hour and go back to bed. But it wouldn't be long after closing your eyes and slowly fading into sleep that you experience your second glitch of the day. That glitch being the hypnic jerk. Just picture this. I'm sure we've all been there. You're laying in your bed, you're closing your eyes, and you can feel yourself drifting off to sleep. And just as you're in that twilight between wakefulness and unconsciousness, you feel yourself instantly jolt, almost as if you've just fallen or completely lost your balance. This jolt, or jerk, is completely involuntary, and is once again another real-life glitch. Fortunately, similar to hitting your funny bone, the hypnic jerk is not a sign of anything wrong, and is in most cases completely harmless and completely normal. However, that doesn't make it any less scary in the moment, because the shift of state from from basically sleeping to the most alert you've ever been is, well, pretty staggering. Regardless, I'm sure we all understand the feeling of the hypnic jerk, and I don't need to explain the experience. But what I do want to explain is exactly why this happens. And the answer is unfortunately not super satisfying, because there is not a definitive answer to this question yet. However, there are leading theories that are logical and likely the case. The leading theory about hypnic jerks as of now is that in this transition between being awake and being asleep, sometimes your body can kind of miscommunicate with itself and interpret signals wrong. And in the case of hypnic jerks, what's happening is as your muscles begin to relax and as your mind and body are transitioning from being awake to sleeping, somewhere in your brain, somebody is hitting the alarm button because part of your brain is interpreting this relaxation of muscles as essentially a loss of control. More specifically, a loss of balance or simply falling altogether. And as a result, for self-defense, your body tries to have you jolt to protect yourself, either to regain your balance or brace for impact on a fall that isn't happening whatsoever. And I'm not sure about you guys, but I have vividly had multiple hypnic jerk experiences where in my dream, I was doing something that led to the jerk, which I don't know how that's even connected. Like, you know how sometimes you're on Instagram Reels and you see a reel where somebody's playing baseball, but the ball just hits the camera and you literally jump? That was basically going on in my dream leading up to the hypnic jerk. However, I'm curious if your body is anticipating a hypnic jerk and for that reason subconsciously plan something in your dreams. Or do your dreams cause the jerk in some cases? I don't know, but back to our hungover bro. Since you've now involuntarily been subjected to biological shock therapy, you decide that maybe it's time to get up. However, because it's the new year and it's obviously a new you decide to break old habits. And we all know that the best way to break an old habit is by doing it just one more time. And for that reason, you grab your lotion, your tissues, and open up your laptop. And without going into too much detail about what's going on there, we can actually talk about a different type of jerking that's not a hypnic jerk. At least kind of. Have you ever been hanging out with your bros and noticed that some people jerk it with their left hand while others do it? Okay, that's a dumb example. Let's do a different example. Have you ever noticed that some people reach for their phone from their bed with their left hand while some do it from their right hand? This phenomenon is known as handedness, and it's actually quite interesting. Unsurprisingly, a majority of the world is right-handed. But hopefully all of us also know that there is a population of the world that is left-handed. And if you are a true scholar, then you probably also know that there is an even smaller percentage of people that are ambidextrous, meaning that they could interchangeably use either hand as their dominant hand. All these are interesting and not necessarily uncommon, but did you know that at least 2 of these 3 are a glitch? Let me explain. Now, for starters, the reason why I say 2 out of these 3 is because I don't want to directly call out anybody as being glitched, because realistically that's not the case. But the lore behind how you develop your dominant hand is really quite interesting. But I guess if we're being fair, statistically, 90% of people are right-handed, meaning that, of course, 10% of people on average are left-handed, potentially suggesting that being left-handed could be a glitch. But on the same token, potentially everybody who's not ambidextrous is having a glitch because, I mean, we have 2 arms, why aren't they both dominant? Or at the very least, why doesn't everybody have the same dominant arm? These are great questions, and the answer is, well, interesting. Being either left or right-handed is one of the most obvious ways of showcasing a human brain being wired differently. And before people stretch it too far, this wiring differently doesn't necessarily extend to other things. I'm specifically talking about the wiring for your dominant hand. However, there are people that believe that being left or right-handed may come with other related traits, although this isn't necessarily scientific, and there is no inherent superiority between being left or right-handed. Scientists believe that the reason why some people have a different dominant hand is because of a cocktail of different factors, specifically genetic factors, prenatal brain development, and environmental factors. And it's also believed by scientists that because you can observe a child having either a left or right dominant hand at a very young age, it is believed that your dominant hand is not a learned behavior, and that in some cases your brain even picks your dominant hand before you're ever born, as your brain is still, well, developing. But regardless of which arm you use dominantly to grab your tissues or grab anything else, the reality is that this glitch happens in your brain before you're even born, and truly doesn't mean anything. And I think in the modern day, we all understand this. However, in the past, people were extremely superstitious. And if you lived at basically any point in history prior to the last 100 or so years, you would have been judged extremely harshly because you were left-handed, because people perceived this biological glitch to be something more nefarious. And in Roman culture, for example, people were so superstitious that left-handedness was actually associated with being a bad person. And when Christianity became the dominant religion in Europe, this tradition sort of stuck around for a while and took a long time for the stigma to be, well, erased. And while left-handed people are definitely not glitches, they have more or less experienced a glitch in their mom's belly. And for that reason, they've kind of had a rough go of things. More so in the past, but even in the modern day, there are just so many things that are designed and ergonomically optimized for right-handed people. But fortunately, the business of left-handed products has boomed, and, well, here we are today. After completing your solo session of morning glory, you finally put your feet on the floor and get your booty out of bed, officially starting your new year, hoping that you're done experiencing any more glitches. As you stand up and shuffle around your room, you feel that your room is feeling stuffy, so you walk over to your window, open it up, and take a deep breath of that fresh, crisp January winter air. But instead of experiencing a blissful inhale of crisp air, you instead feel like you have just been stabbed in the lung. Obviously, any shooting or stabbing pain in your chest is an immediate, obvious sign of a medical emergency. However, in this case, it's actually not. Although this pain in your chest is extremely uncomfortable and is definitely scary the first time you experience it, it's not a medical emergency, and it's actually another real-life glitch. Interestingly, at least for me personally, when this first happened to me, even though I felt like something was wrong, I was too scared to tell my mom about it because it happened when I was a kid, and I just hoped it would go away on its own. And it did, and I kind of forgot about it. But every time this would happen every few months or so, I had that same fear, and I never bothered to Google it or tell anybody about it. I just, as a child, accepted my death, assuming I had a ruptured lung and I was just simply waiting to perish. But instead, I got over it and then started playing Minecraft again. If this sounds even remotely familiar to you, let me explain what's actually happening when you're experiencing this very intense but typically short-lived chest pain. According to doctors, at least in young people, the primary cause for this sudden and sharp chest pain is something known as precordial catch syndrome. And similar to hitting your funny bone, the precordial catch syndrome is literally caused, once again, by a pinched nerve. Interestingly, the whole glitch of this chest pain known as precordial catch syndrome has absolutely nothing to do with your lungs or heart at all. At least for me, every time I experienced this pain, I thought my lung was punctured or being ruptured in some way. However, that's not the case at all, and it's only a nerve that's passing through that cavity. This glitch or syndrome is actually typically caused, most commonly, by sitting with poor posture, or directly after changing your seating position, which makes it kind of even more shocking because if you're just sitting down, that's kind of the last time you expect to have a random shooting pain. But when it comes to precordial catch syndrome, it can happen to you at any time. And in your case, simply opening the window and looking out of it and taking a deep inhale was enough to trigger it. And now that deep inhale is extremely painful. But luckily for you, it's at least harmless and will pass in minutes. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm experiencing this lung glitch, even though it has nothing to do with your lung, the last thing I want to do is take a deep breath. And I'll typically just take shallow breaths until it passes. However, some doctors do recommend taking one very deep breath, as that is known to sometimes end the pain immediately. So I guess it's kind of up to you if you want to wait a few minutes till it passes naturally, or if you want to endure the pain and get rid of it instantly. Either way, there's absolutely no risks to your health, which I think is comforting, especially for many of us who have experienced this and just assumed that we had something wrong with us that we just wanted to, well, ignore. And I just wish I could have told 10-year-old bro that. Or even last week's bro, because honestly, I didn't even know about this until right now, researching for this video. But back to you. After you finally let the pain subside, you decide to close your window, leave the bedroom, and enter the kitchen because you want to have a nice breakfast. Although, as soon as both of your feet were planted in the kitchen, well, you've totally forgot what you went in there for. And if this situation sounds familiar to you, then you have also experienced this glitch. And this glitch is actually known as the doorway effect. The doorway effect is a common cognitive glitch where your brain essentially resets or reorganizes its thoughts as you move from one environment to another. It may seem like something small, but walking through a doorway creates enough of a clear boundary within your mind between environments that your brain literally creates this as a transitional shift in context. And because of that, as you go from the old environment to the new environment, your brain sometimes can clear the cache, making you feel clueless once you're in this room, even though you just had what you wanted to do on your mind. This glitch in some cases can be scary because you literally feel like you have early onset dementia, but it's just your brain trying to reduce some of the background noise so it can focus on this new environment, even though you just went from your bedroom to your kitchen. It should go without saying that this glitch is actually harmless. And believe it or not, it's not a sign of low intelligence or a poor working memory whatsoever. This effect is actually a reflection of how your brain organizes experiences into segments based on your environment. And as I mentioned earlier, if your brain is effective at removing cognitive clutter, the thought you had in the old environment, then in some situations, it can misfire, remove too much context, and well, you'll be clueless for a second or two, typically. And while this happens to most of us on a semi-regular basis, there are factors that can actually cause this to happen more often, such as general stress or multitasking. But in any context, it's not dangerous, it's not a negative sign, and it only happens because your brain accidentally got rid of too much stuff to try to focus on this new environment. After noticing a spoon on your dining room table, you realized why you walked in the kitchen in the first place. You obviously wanted to have breakfast. And because this was already a glitch-filled day of a year that was supposed to be glitch glitch-free, you decide to have the breakfast of champions, Cheerios with beer, because your hangover was not going to treat itself. But as you walk over to the pantry and open it, you realize one fatal mistake. The Cheerios that you swore were in the pantry were nowhere to be found. And even though you literally bought them yesterday, no matter where you look, it seems like they have almost vanished. Getting irritated, you call your mom into the kitchen, asking if she saw them or moved them, and without even saying anything to you, it seems like your mom reached into the pantry and pulled the Cheerios out of thin air. And embarrassingly, you realize that the Cheerios were right in front of you the whole time. They just weren't exactly where you expected them to be. If you've ever been searching for something only to realize that it was literally right in front of you the whole time and you were just somehow ignoring it, then, well, you've also experienced this real-life glitch. Similar to the doorway effect, not being able to see something directly in your plain sight of view has nothing to do with memory failure or anything of the sort. This glitch is once again a mechanism of your brain trying to get rid of low priority or irrelevant information. And sometimes, well, it gets rid of the wrong stuff. One example of this mechanism working properly is the fact that you literally can't notice your nose. Like, your brain intentionally ignores your nose, although you can totally see it. And if you don't believe me, put your finger on the tip of your nose and look down at it. For a few moments afterwards, you will be hyper aware of your nose, at least in most cases. But as we've seen in other cases, you can literally ignore exactly what you're looking for. And once again, stress and multitasking can help amplify this, well, glitch. Another similar but less visual example of not seeing something in plain sight is, well, looking for your phone when it's literally in your hand, or looking for your car keys when they're literally in your ignition. Regardless, after your mom seemingly magically pulled cereal out of thin air, you enjoy a quick bowl of Cheerios and quickly head out of the house because your mom asked you to grab something from the store. As you close the door and begin to walk towards your car, you get in, start the car, and begin driving, only to instantly have the thought, did I lock the front door? And did I turn off the sink after cleaning my bowl? These are two examples of simple questions we likely ask ourselves every day. But believe it or not, they're actually also a mental glitch. I'm gonna keep this one brief as it works on similar mechanisms of the last two, but the reason why so many people are so unsure if they've done basic tasks like locking a door or turning something off is actually the fact that it's a low thought or low attention task. Most of us habitually turn off what we need to turn off and lock what we need to lock. And for that reason, we don't pay much attention to do it. We do it subconsciously. But here's the thing, our memories are strongly tied to our attention, meaning that if our focus is weak on something, at least consciously, our memories will be weak too. Which is why, more often than not, if we do a task habitually, we will likely have little to no memory of it, creating doubt in our mind, potentially causing us to double check or have anxiety until we come back home to check. However, in most cases, we did do the thing, we just didn't remember. And once again, this is just our brain's attempt to have less cache in the background so we can have more mental bandwidth to focus on what matters. You know, the saber-toothed tiger in front of us, not the locked door in our past. And in some severe cases, this glitch could actually lead you to cause your child at home when you go on a family vacation. But luckily enough, this will actually be the premise of one of the best Christmas movies of all time. After retracing your steps in your mind, you come to the conclusion that you definitely did lock the door, and your anxiety reduces at least a little bit. And because you feel like you've been battling yourself for hours now, you decide to check the time, because you know the drive to the grocery store is 20 minutes, and you have to be at least halfway there. But as you look at the clock on your dashboard, you notice that you've only been driving for 2 minutes. And at this point, it feels, well, impossible. And while the only explanation at this point may seem like a time warp, in reality, you are experiencing, well, you guessed it, another glitch. This glitch being time dilation. And while this phenomenon is something most of us experience on a daily basis, I would argue most of us don't actually know how it works. There's a popular saying that goes, time flies when you're having fun. And honestly, that's kind of scientifically true. But also, the opposite is true. Time goes very slow when you're scared, and you just experienced that on your drive. Because of the anxiety of not remembering if you locked your door, your brain had to process more information per second than it would on average because you were trying to retrace your steps and try to remember exactly if you moved the knob or not. And because even though you were simply just driving down the road, due to the fact that you were so deep in thought thinking about locking the door or not, and the additional information you had to process to do so, your mind was creating denser memories, and for that reason, as you look back on that 2-minute drive you had, it feels like it was longer than it actually was. And that's because your brain indirectly measures time through attention, memory, and sensory input. Now, interestingly, on the contrast, when you are doing repetitive or enjoyable tasks that don't require a ton of thought, your mind is able to relax, and for that reason, time seems like it's simply flying by. But that's because you're not necessarily forming as many memories, and your perception of that time passed is, well, less. And this mechanism is extremely similar to why you forget if that door was even locked in the first place. And once again, this glitch is not a flaw or a sign of anything negative, it's simply a byproduct of your brain trying to be as efficient efficient as possible. And sometimes it doesn't always get it right. And I guess the negative byproduct of this byproduct is that fun times seem to be really short and bad times seem to be really long. But in reality, they're just both your brain's perspective of them. After a long, seemingly endless drive, you arrive at the grocery store, but as soon as you walk through the doors, you notice something horrible brewing. Deep within your diaphragm, you notice a spasm happening, and before you can even process what's going on, you make that terrible sound. You have just got the hiccups out of nowhere. And once again, you have been cursed with another real-life glitch. And as I would bet money that everybody watching this video has experienced hiccups, I doubt most of us understand the true reason why we experience such a seemingly random, well, reflex. Unsurprisingly, hiccups are harmless. I think we all know that by now. But what not everybody knows is the reason why they happen. And hiccups are actually caused by the diaphragm, which is the primary muscle responsible for breathing. What's happening when you hiccup is that your diaphragm is unexpectedly spasming. And with each spasm of the diaphragm is a quick intake of air. Now, this intake of air is short-lived and is actually abruptly cut off by your vocal cords snapping shut, which is what creates that classic hiccup sound. But besides how hiccuping even works, the reason we get hiccups is because of, well, a pretty big handful of factors. Hiccups can be triggered by either eating too quickly, swallowing air, drinking a carbonated beverage, a sudden change in temperature in your environment, emotional stress, or excitement. And the single common denominator amongst most of those triggers is that the nerves involved with breathing, specifically the phrenic and vagus nerves, become irritated, overstimulated, and for that reason, essentially set off the hiccup reflex. And this reflex can go on for minutes, hours, or in some cases, even days, and even more extreme cases, weeks. If nothing else in this video, we've learned that nerves are responsible for a lot of glitches. But it's interesting how much they just glitch and begin working against us. Because while they are harmless, they're definitely annoying, and in some cases embarrassing. And because your hiccups were just so severe in this grocery store, you decide that whatever your mom needed, it could wait until later. So you decide to get back in your car, drive home, and step into the kitchen. Luckily, your hiccups went away on your drive home. However, as soon as you step into the kitchen, you are hit with an overwhelming feeling that what you are doing right now, you've done before. Everything was the same. The clothes you're wearing, the time of day, the location you're standing was all overwhelmingly familiar. And while this feeling hits you in such a strong way, it's not scary, it's just odd. And it's also a glitch commonly known as deja vu. One good example of deja vu for people that watch the channel a lot is me telling you that 75% of you watching this video right now are not subscribed, at least according to YouTube. And also, I love making videos that you guys really enjoy. So if you love this video about real-life glitches and want to see another one, make sure to leave a like or leave a comment below saying part 2 so I know that you guys want another episode in this series. Now, shilling aside, deja vu is likely one of the most common mental glitches we've all experienced, probably on a semi-regular basis. For me, deja vu is pretty rare, but probably happens at least maybe once a year. Although almost every time I experience it, it's equally unsettling, but also rather short-lived. It's almost like a wave that hits you and then just splashes away and fades back into the ocean. Although for me, the lingering feeling after deja vu is definitely eerie. And what else is eerie about this glitch is the fact that there's no definitive reasoning for deja vu, at least as of yet. The leading explanation for deja vu right now is that deja vu happens when the brain processes the same information in two slightly different ways. And if that sounds confusing, well, just imagine information floating through your brain. But instead of information going through two different pathways at the same speed, information in pathway 1 is just slightly faster than information in pathway 2. As information from pathway 1 reaches the final destination faster than 2, by the time that the second information gets there as well, it perceives that second part of information not as complementary to the first, but as a recollection, if that makes sense. It's an interesting theory, but it's also not the only one. Another more simple theory for why deja vu happens is that our brain is literally just glitching out and swapping out the emotions for familiarity with recollection. And based off what we've learned about the brain so far in this video, that seems plausible. But because you've just had an awful day so far, you've been hungover all day, you've been experiencing endless glitches, and your head is pounding, you decide that your best bet now is to go to bed, catch a nap, rest, recover, hopefully sleep everything off, and end this endless streak of glitches, hopefully for this entire year. As you get as snug as a bug in a rug and begin to once again drift off into dreamland, you fortunately avoid the hypnotic jerk and successfully fall into sleep. Although it wouldn't be long until you experience the final glitch of the day. As you lay in your bed, you feel a looming presence looking over you. And you so happen to, half asleep, half awake, open your eyes, only to notice the most terrifying shadow figure in the corner of your room. Being absolutely petrified, the only thing you want to do is hide and scream and run, but unfortunately, you can do nothing of the above. Your mouth won't open, your arms won't move, and this creature is only moving closer and closer to you. Your body is absolutely paralyzed, and your mind is only half on your side. And this glitch is likely the most terrifying we've discussed in this entire list. That glitch being sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis is only typically something that people experience for seconds to minutes tops, but that doesn't make it any less terrifying in the moment. The reason why sleep paralysis happens is because during REM sleep, your brain automatically shuts off your muscles so you don't act out on your dream, which is the reason why we're not all sleepwalkers all the time. But that's another glitch we can talk about in a part 2, sleepwalking. However, sometimes when your brain turns off your muscles, it can also forget to turn itself off, which leads to sleep paralysis. The state where your brain is either half or still fully awake, but your muscles are, well, paralyzed, leaving you in a very awkward and scary situation. Although, fortunately, it's not dangerous, or a sign of any mental illness or demonic possession. Sleep paralysis is more likely to occur if you've experienced sleep deprivation, irregular sleep schedules, high stress, or, interestingly, sleeping on your back. But in every case of sleep paralysis, your body will figure itself out, albeit with a bit of discomfort to your psyche, especially if you're experiencing, well, shadowy hallucinations. Luckily for you, as this shadow demon crawled onto your bed, it noticed your extremely crispy and crunchy bed sheets and decided that you were the real demon here, and it disappeared. And as that fog lifted and your fear was gone, you were able to truly go to bed and end this very glitchful day, hoping that the next day would be better. How to get rich in every time period. Not too long ago, I made a video about what it was like to be rich in every time period, and you guys really liked that video. In that video, I talked about the experiences and the lifestyle of wealthy people in every time period, and only briefly touched on how that wealth was typically acquired. But in this video, I wanted to provide some perspective on how wealth could be made and how you could get rich in every time period. Let's get started. The Stone Age. This segment is likely going to be the most wholesome on the entire list, and that's just because the Stone Age was a simpler time. Genuinely, not many things were required to be wealthy, and the concept of being rich or wealthy didn't even exist. In the Stone Age, simply surviving was hard enough. So if you miraculously survived childbirth and somehow survived the brutality of a Stone Age childhood, you were already essentially a billionaire. And everything even remotely close to wealth had to do directly with your survivability. That meant food, shelter, water, your livelihood, and in turn, your wealth. So now that we understand that the modern concept of wealth simply doesn't apply here, what does wealth look like in the Stone Age, and how could you acquire it? Let's start from the beginning. Like I mentioned earlier, to be wealthy, you first need to be alive. And that means the basis of our wealth will be our life. And as a baby, our life is in the hands of our parents. So the original rich babies or boss babies or Nepo babies were simply kids that were lucky enough to have parents that didn't die during childbirth or didn't accidentally kill them or allow them to be killed in their likely harsh environment. Already, this is making me realize how much we take for granted. Next up, assuming your parents care about you, survived childbirth, don't plan on killing you, and are healthy, fit, and able to provide for you properly, you will be able to experience childhood the Stone Age way, which is basically just Minecraft, but not a game, just a reality. Now, assuming you survived your entire childhood and adolescence, you are now an adult in the Stone Age on your own, looking to build wealth for yourself. And by that, I mean literally just survive. I'm really stressing this point because it is extremely important to consider that simply surviving up until this point is a major achievement and basically the equivalent of being handed a $100 million trust fund as soon as you turn 18. But now in this hypothetical scenario, when you are alive, healthy, and on your own, what do you do next? Unfortunately, there is no online business or jobs, and if you want something, you have to go get it. Literally. The first thing you would need to get is food, which is the first and likely primary pillar of wealth in the Stone Age, a steady supply of food. Being on land that was fertile, not only for yourself but for animals, directly impacted your likelihood of survival, and therefore, your wealth. If you lived in the right biome, nature would provide for you, as long as you were a semi-skilled hunter and in tune with your environment. However, the wrong biome would leave you starved and dehydrated in only a matter of days. This directly ties into the next pillar of wealth, which I'll combine two separate parts into one: location and shelter. Of course, food is essential for life and, in this case, wealth. But like we discussed, to have this steady source of food, you must have a conducive environment, which in itself is a form of wealth. But I kind of already made that point, so without repeating myself, let's discuss the second part of this: shelter. Depending on what part of the Stone Age we're talking about, because it does go pretty far back, a lot of shelters were more or less natural, with the most common being a cave, hence the term caveman. If you wanted to be rich, and I mean ultra rich, you lived on land that provided you food and also had shelter that was ready for you to move right in. Consider this prime real estate. This is the prehistoric equivalent of moving into a condo that has a restaurant on on the main floor. It's everything you need all in one place. Well, almost everything. We're still missing an essential component, which is the third pillar, that being water. You now have your prime real estate. You have your cave. You have your wild berries growing outside your cave apartment, and you have a steady flow of cute critters that you stomp on and eat on a daily basis. But the last thing to make you a true bajillionaire is to have a steady stream of fresh water, ideally trickling right through a stream right outside of your cave. Without water, shelter and food is almost useless because you won't be around long to enjoy it. So this supply of water is the perfect trifecta for your life and, in this case, your wealth. But it's a bit boring if we end there. What's wealth without a bit of legacy? And maybe someone to share it with. Just because living was hard enough in the Stone Age doesn't mean that there wasn't additional luxuries you could indulge in. And for this example, let's pick our bonuses. I have my cave, I have my food, I have my water. What am I missing? I'd say a cave woman to spend my days with and unga bunga with at night. And with your partner by your side, you're now able to continue your legacy, have Caveman Jr., and ideally allow them to inherit your success. And by that I mean your cave doesn't get raided, the stream doesn't dry up, and the animals don't migrate elsewhere. And spoiler alert, those are all going to happen. And all of your hard work is basically null and void because everything that you had to go through to build your wealth and literally survive is going to have to be done entirely from scratch once again by your children. I think I've made it crystal clear that wealth in the Stone Age is simply being alive. So to answer the question, how do you get rich in the Stone Age? You just don't die. The Bronze Age. No, not the guy that plays for the Lakers, the Bronze Age. The Bronze Age is really a landmark in terms of human development. And as we'll see in this segment, there are many changes between humans and wealth in the Stone Age and the Bronze Age. For starters, the Bronze Age is a much more concentrated timeline. The Stone Age, for example, literally goes on for millions of years, whereas the Bronze Age is roughly 2,000 years in total. Don't allow this relatively short timeline to fool you. The amount of development that took place during this era was rapid and impactful. Some major differences right off the bat between the Stone Age and the Bronze Age is that people began to settle. In the Stone Age, a lot of people were nomadic, similar to animals, going where the resources were, as typically ideal locations didn't last very long. But with the introduction of agriculture and other advanced survival techniques, people were able to settle in locations that were deemed ideal. One major difference between the Stone Age and the Bronze Age that was spawned out of settlements were possessions. Because when you are nomadic, you're not able to carry much with you, and for that reason, you didn't own much. On the contrary, when you have a place to call your own, you're able to start collecting a thing or two. And from that, begin to store value and ultimately accumulate wealth. Besides this, we are seeing early coinage, and with this, early commerce as well, which will serve as the foundation for how we measure wealth for the rest of the video. With developed skills, new tools, larger settlements, and early coinage, it's not hard to believe that trade was essentially inevitable. What did they trade, you may ask? Well, everything, but most importantly, bronze. And although settlements and trade are developing, it doesn't necessarily mean that life was all of a sudden easy at this point. Life was still difficult, and every skill and piece of luck required to survive in the Stone Age is still required now. But for the sake of this video, we're gonna assume this is more or less of a given, so we can focus on the specifics of what made you rich in the Bronze Age. Like we mentioned in the last video, during the Bronze Age, wealth began to be associated with the control and production of bronze, which is a valuable metal that is made from copper and tin. Being rich meant you had access to metal ores and the knowledge required to craft tools, weapons, and ornaments, which were things that everybody needed. Maybe not the ornaments, but tools and weapons definitely. Like I mentioned, with settlements growing, trade became more prominent, both inside of settlements and also between settlements via established trade routes. And if you are someone who was able to take advantage of these trade routes, you could significantly enhance your wealth. Besides commerce, another way to gain money and power was through social status, which started to become more of an important thing during this time period. During this time, chiefs and leaders would amass their wealth through the people that they ruled, whether they had full control over the tribe's resources or they simply took contributions from each of their people. Now that we have a bit more context on the Bronze Age and what exactly wealth looked like in the Bronze Age, how could you get rich? For the sake of simplicity, let's assume that you had a great upbringing. Your parents were alive and you survived, and now you're 18 years old looking to build your life and become wealthy in the Bronze Age. Like I mentioned, you ultimately have two primary options. One is to become a merchant, or two, become a leader. We'll touch on both of these. Starting with becoming a merchant, the control and manufacturing of copper was a booming industry. So if I were planning to get rich, I would definitely start there. The first thing I would do is start looking for copper. I would make my wood and maybe even stone pickaxe and get straight to the mines, looking for any copper deposits I could find. Now, this isn't obviously the only way you could gain wealth. I think a better way to gain wealth in the Bronze Age is to become an artisan, specifically making the best type of either tool, weapon, or ornament. For this example, let's say that we want to make the best sword possible. In this case, I would go to a blacksmith and immediately beg them for their knowledge. I don't care if I was unpaid, I don't care if I was like SpongeBob at the Krusty Krab and I had to pay to work there. I would be getting my hours in at the blacksmith so I could hone in my skills on making the best swords possible. Why would I do that? Well, if I could make the best swords and gain a reputation as the guy who makes the best swords, which would hopefully be my official title, I would hope to potentially make a name for myself and ideally catch the attention of the powers that be. Because you know who needs swords? The troops. And you know who wants their troops to win battles? Leaders. And you know who has all of the money? Also leaders. For the most part. I think you see where I'm going here. That's just one example, but if you were doing anything valuable related to copper, chances are you were able to make a few shillings for yourself. But let's just say for this example, you weren't very inclined to mine or craft. And in that example, I would recommend you go the route of leadership. How would I go about that? I would first identify the powers at be. You could try to assassinate him and hopefully fill the power vacuum, but I think that the likelihood of that working out are low. This would definitely be a slow grind, but if you're willing to put in the time and you're charismatic enough, I think it could work. I would get as close as possible as I could to the leader, maybe potentially offering to be some sort of servant. At this point, I would do my absolute best to gain their trust, gain their respect, and ideally become someone that they consider to be a friend. Through this relationship, I would prove that my ideas were worthy and that I potentially had the skills to be a leader, without ever, of course, showing up the leader himself. At this point, over time, I would wait for opportunities to arise where I could potentially fill voids where leadership was needed or ideas were required. And hopefully, through my connection to the actual leader, I could become a person of power myself and benefiting from that sweet, sweet Bronze Age nepotism. Now, in reality, were people in the Bronze Age really so entrepreneurial focused or status focused that they'd be willing to cozy up to the king? I think potentially. And people like this definitely existed, but they weren't the norm. Most people were just trying to exist, and serfdom was basically hard labor all day to feed yourself and your family and potentially make a few dollars on the side, or simply to do your duties for the village that you lived in to make sure that you had the protection that they'd offered you. So to answer the question of how do you get rich in the Bronze Age, I'd say your best bet is to get involved in the bronze industry in any way that you think you would excel the most. In my example, I wanted to master blacksmithing swords and use this to my advantage to essentially get government contracts, or at the very least, sell desirable artisan swords to rich merchants and political leaders, and ultimately get that bag. The Iron Age. What a time to be alive. During the Bronze Age, we experienced more development in 2,000 years than we did during the over 3 million years of human existence in the Stone Age. Due to this exponential growth, you would likely assume that this trend continued into the Iron Age, but that's not exactly the case. Like we mentioned in the previous video, the end of the Bronze Age was a rather rough time, and due to major situations that happened, which are honestly worthy of their own video, most of the world was left in a place where production, trade routes, literacy, and overall progress were either diminished or reduced, making the Bronze Age more or less of a 2 steps forward, 1 step back sort of situation. That being said, it's not all doom and gloom because we're humans and we're chads, and we ultimately figured it out. Obviously, just look at us now. But that leads us to the beginning of the Iron Age. We needed to rebuild, and we needed to do it now. The beginning of the Iron Age was very similar to the beginning of the Bronze Age, with the primary difference, of course, being the metal at play, which, you guessed it, was iron. Iron wasn't necessarily a stronger material, but it was more readily available and it was easier to produce, which helped facilitate a lot of progress. Which is why, if you're paying attention to the dates, you'll notice that the Iron Age was also much shorter than the Bronze Age, and the Bronze Age was much, much, much shorter than the Stone Age. The exponential growth is still continuing even after the bump in the road. Now, that's a nice underdog story and all, but how do we get rich? Like I mentioned in the last video, being rich in the Iron Age was not very different than being rich in the Bronze Age. And I hate to break it to you, getting rich in the Iron Age also wasn't very different than getting rich in the Bronze Age. But I'll still give you a new hypothetical in this new time period. Let's assume that once again, you're a healthy, able-bodied 18-year-old ready to start your life. The artisan sword company that your parents had founded has now gone Bronze Age bankrupt and they are dead. For the sake of this story, they just died too. They went broke and died. So now you're here, alone, looking to get that bag in the Iron Age. What do you do? Once again, you have two options. Get involved in emerging industries, in this case, the production of iron, or try to get as cozy as possible with the powers that be, which at this point in time isn't an easy task. So in this case, I'm becoming an iron mogul. With establishments growing and jobs becoming more or less of a thing, my plan is to find and own the best iron deposit my settlement and likely other settlements have ever seen. But here's the thing, if I'm just one guy looking around for iron deposits, I may not be that successful, and I may miss things. And even once I do find it, there's a lot of work to be done there. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I'll need help. First thing I'll do is go to the nearest farm. I'm gonna try to round up as many farmers that I can find who are no longer interested in farming and looking for a better opportunity. At this point, everyone's been seeing the new and shiny iron tools and they know that they're expensive. And likely they're interested and want their own. And my proposal to them would be, join my team, help me find an iron deposit, let's mine it together, and with you, I will share the rewards. Realistically, the proposal is no money up front, but a lot of money down the line if you're willing to work with me. And once I have a good group of guys, we're ready to go. Day one, we're looking, searching, scoundering, floundering, sleuthing, anything we can do to find iron deposits. Once this has been achieved, we begin the hard work, mining. We gather as much as we can and determine how good this vein of iron really is. And if we see potential, we set up camp. Once we begin mining, we begin either collaborating with an existing manufacturing facility, or we build our own to be able to turn the raw materials into a usable iron to make tools, weapons, and once again, ornaments. Once we get a more refined process, we then begin to stockpile and finally sell our refined material. We could sell the raw material, but we also know that if we sell a more refined material, we can get more money. And from that point, we begin our journey. All of the men that were mining are now selling, door to door, potentially. We are going to every blacksmith and offering them the best iron in the best condition with minimal work on their end. Just heat it and forge it. What more could you want? Ideally, once again, the leaders at B take notice and want to buy my iron, but I'm happy if even just the blacksmiths prefer mine. At this point, we begin to collect money and it's a beautiful system. In the Bronze Age, I wanted to make the swords, and in the Iron Age, I was the person selling the materials to those artisans. Is this a realistic plan? I highly doubt it. This oversimplified, trust me bro hypothetical is leaving out so many components. Specifically, all of the violence that would have potentially taken place either between my team, between settlements, between people in my settlement that wanted my iron deposits, and so many other things that could have potentially existed. I'm just now realizing that this video is basically what it was like to be an entrepreneur in every time period, which I guess makes sense because entrepreneurship and wealth typically go hand in hand. The medieval era. Now things are really heating up and we are in full swing of development. People are settled and civilization is making major strides. There's a very established class system and money is more important than ever. The richest people in the medieval era were the people that were closest to the powers that be, those being the nobility and the merchants that were able to sell products over very long distances. Both of these were extremely useful to the king and therefore paid very nicely. And considering the major wealth gap in the huge centralization of money and power, your best bet was to get money from the king, because most other people just didn't have it. During this time, spices, precious metals, and silk were extremely desirable materials, and I'm going to use those to my advantage once we get to the hypothetical. For my plan to get rich in the medieval era, I want to do something different. I'm done being an entrepreneur. I want to now become a criminal. And for this reason, I'll need to target merchants. You see, the nobility had most of their wealth come from the land that they owned, which was given to them from the monarch. And it's rather hard to steal land, at least not without a fight. So I think I'm better off stealing from the long distance merchants. In this time period, I am more motivated than ever to get my bag up because we are starting to see the early equivalent of modern luxuries. Large, beautiful castles, servants, comfy clothes, something that kind of resembles a toilet, concubines, jewel-encrusted stuff, and other fun stuff like that. So yeah, let's get rich. Although my plan may seem simple, with nations developing and with power becoming centralized, I am at greater risk than ever of being reprimanded for the crimes I'm about to commit. Because now there is rule, there is order, and I need to be very careful about how I go about breaking it. I'll start my journey once again like every other journey as an 18-year-old looking to build my life. Let's say that I was born into an established kingdom, into a regular poor family. My goal is to become a known member of society and a positive one at that. I want to be active in the church, helping those in need, and seen often within the community. But this will work in my favor for my malicious intentions. My goal is to gain the trust specifically of the rich merchants doing long distance trade, because they 1, have the most money, and 2, are the most vulnerable. See, being a thief, I could try to pickpocket around my city, but eventually it's gonna catch up to me. And honestly, there's a cap to how much money I can make. Back to my trust with the merchants. My goal is for them to feel comfortable sharing their information with me, specifically when trade shipments are going out, what the shipments are, and where they are going to be. For example, imagine I just go around the city with a broom every so often, just out of my goodwill, but I always somehow happen to broom where the rich merchants are. This isn't by accident. I want to overhear them, and ideally, I want to gain information. If I'm sweeping right beside 2 rich merchants having a discussion outside and I overhear one of them telling the other one that they had a large shipment of spices just get delivered and they are currently days away from getting their large payment, I'm going to inquire. I may ask this merchant how the shipment went and where they shipped it and where they even got the spices. I'm going to pretend like I'm interested in the business, when in reality, I just want to know when's that money coming into town and what route is it going to take. Let's just assume that this merchant slips up and he accidentally tells me that his people always come in the back route to the kingdom and they always head home under the veil of night. At that point, I have all of the information I need. I will go about my day, and as soon as the sun starts to set, I will put on my dark cloak and begin my journey. I will begin my trek on the back trail, getting outside of the kingdom and closer to my reward. I'll likely go 10, 20, 30, maybe even 40 kilometers on the trail. Something far enough from my kingdom so nobody knows what's going on, but still not too far that I can't do it in one night. I have 2 options. I can either hide and sneak attack these people on the way back, or I could gain their attention in other ways. For this example, my strategy is tricking the merchants into stopping and thinking that I need help. I brought a second robe with me and I folded it in a way that made it look like it was a swaddled baby. I'm going to be sitting in the middle of the trail holding my baby, rocking back and forth hysterically, waiting for them. Once they arrive, I'm going to beg them for their help and tell them that they need to help save my baby. I am going to be inconsolable and overwhelming to them. They're going to want to leave me immediately. Unfortunately, I don't need much time to distract them. Because the merchant didn't tell me who was carrying the gold and where it was held, pickpocketing here is useless, and my only option is to kill them. Because I have the agility and sword skills of an absolute ninja, I flawlessly cut them all in half and they die instantly. And with my expertly placed slices, the bag of gold and silver instantly reveals itself to me. I grab the loot, leave the men, and head back into my kingdom. I arrive the same night I left, I put my robe away, and in the morning, I start the nice side of my double life. Here's the problem with this situation. If money's going missing all the time, and I, a poor person, all of a sudden becomes rich, people are gonna ask questions. So I can't really spend my money, but that's okay. Because once I'm satisfied with the amount of money I have, I can leave my settlement and begin a new life. If I can travel far enough and go to places where I've never been heard of, which is likely the case if I'm just a locally known, gentle, poor person, in any new settlement I go to, I can tell them a rather convincing story that I am a wealthy merchant who was ran out of town by a bad gang and I'm just looking to have a peaceful life somewhere nice. Is this a likely or potentially even realistic situation? I highly doubt it, once again, but I think it's an actually pretty funny hypothetical of one way a rather evil person could get rich in the medieval era. And honestly, I would bet money that something like this happened at least once, and was probably more common than we think. Violence was common, robbery was everywhere, law only really existed inside of castle walls, and people were brutal. So to answer your question, how do you get rich in the medieval era? Well, there's plenty of ways, but if you're not born into money and you're not willing to put in the effort to become a successful merchant, I'd say your best bet is to go all Assassin's Creed and become the best thief you can absolutely be. The early modern era. At this point, we've gone through millions of years of history, and the early modern era is our last stop before the modern day. And the early modern era, although relatively short, is one of the most influential eras of all time, and is where we see the foundation set for the modern world that we live in today, in good ways and bad ways too. In the early modern era, wealth was driven by exploration, trade, and colonization. Nations and individuals who invested in voyages reaped enormous profits from new trade routes and new resources. Merchants are richer than ever, and now the early versions of bankers are also accumulating wealth through the emerging global trade. Like almost every other time period, owning land and engaging in agriculture is still extremely important. But with the continued growth of commerce, finance, and manufacturing, more and more opportunities are beginning to present themselves to, once again, get that bag. So we're in the early modern era. How are we going to get rich? Well, we have two new options, exploration and colonization. And for the sake of my reputation, let's go with exploration. My goal as an explorer is going to be to build the absolute best team of cartographers, navigators, researchers, and writers, so I can not only establish new trade routes, but also make extra money by developing maps and documenting what I'm seeing on my journeys. Because during this point in time, a lot of the world was unmapped and undiscovered, at least to some people. I guess my first step would be to beg the king for a boat and a small loan. This won't be easy, but I'll tell him that I have the best cartographers, the best writers, the best captains, and the best people on my team to make sure that our voyages not only find new lands, but bring back artifacts, establish trade routes with the people that are there, if any, and that the places that we go are documented not only in map form, but in the written word. And if that doesn't convince the king for him to fund my journey, I don't know what will. So in this case, assuming he does, I now have a boat and a small loan of money. But there's one problem. All of those people that I told the king I had on my team, I don't have on my team. And I don't even have a team. So now, I gotta get them. And during this time period, where do you think the best and the brightest would be? Do you think they would be the guy sitting on the side of the road, drinking wine and ale? Likely not. They're likely in the government where I just got the boat and the loan. Now, of course, I can't ask the king for these people because then he'll know I'm lying. So I have to be a bit more creative. What I'm going to do is I'm going to identify the key players in the government, specifically for captains and cartographers, and I'm gonna go to them and tell them, hey, the king gave me a loan, a boat, and he told me that you have to come with me. Now, of course, he could verify this with the king, unless I told him a reason not to. I'm gonna tell these people that the king is mad at them. And I don't know why, but the king said that if he saw them again, he was going to have them executed. And for that reason, these people should come on this adventure with me. Not only to get out of the king's sight for a bit, but also to get back in the king's good graces. This may seem manipulative, and you're 100% right, but it's also, in this situation, my only option. And now, my house of cards is finally complete, and together, we set sail. On this boat, I am more or less useless. So I'm trusting the captain and the cartographer with this entire operation essentially. Fortunately, a lot of areas are simply unmapped. So I just tell the cartographer to tell the captain to go where we haven't gone before. At least where we don't have recorded evidence of going. And from that point, we're off. Even at this point in the story, we've done so much and risked so much just to even get here, and we haven't even made $1 yet, and we are still relatively poor. We have a loaned out ship, a team of people that we're deceiving, and debt to the government in the form of the loan. And if we're unable to find anything of substance, we're cooked. And my elaborate ruse is over. But because everything has kind of perfectly fallen into place in the story, let's continue that trend. And let's say on our first voyage, we discover the most amazing thing ever. What is it, you may ask? It's a remote, abandoned island where the richest pirate gangs hid all of their most valuable loot, including coins, artifacts, booty, and slightly used peg legs. At this point, I need to come clean. I tell the guys, hey, you guys are all being lied to, and if you don't continue the lie with me, then we're all gonna die. The men agree, we get to loot, we go back home, and we do it again and again. And we all live happily ever after. That's just one hypothetical about how you could use exploration to your advantage to get rich in the early modern era. And in case you wanted to learn about how to use colonization to get rich, well, just read a history book. The modern era. Wow, guys, can't you believe it? I've been able to cover millions of years of history, and somehow I've made no mistakes and left out no information. Everything I've said has been completely accurate and not totally oversimplified, glossed over, uninformed, and almost entirely hypothetical. That's crazy. But now, here we are in the modern day. A time period you may be familiar with. I don't think I need to explain too much about what being rich in the present day looks like, but I'll give a quick example. If you want a negative example, I recommend going to our channel and watching this video about rich weirdos. But if you want some positive examples, rich people just like cool stuff. Big houses, big boats, fast cars. And if you're really rich, space travel and goth girlfriends. Now, getting into how you can get rich in the present day, the opportunities are honestly endless. If you're currently watching this looking for a way to get rich, I'm gonna give you a foolproof plan to make more money than you could ever even imagine. The first thing you're going to want to do is grow your hair. Get it as long as possible. The next step is to grow facial hair and get tattoos. This will come in handy. After this, you need to establish a wardrobe of white t-shirts and basketball shorts. And once you have the look, you can begin the work. I need you to every single day begin posting on YouTube. Talk about stuff. Talk about stuff you like. Talk about stuff you don't like. Talk about that time you were almost in a movie. Talk about anything. Over time, people are going to respect you, idolize you, love you, and ultimately need your opinion for just about anything. And people are gonna eat this up. And advertisers are gonna wanna sponsor you and put their ads on your video, making you rich. Oh, and now that you have the system of getting rich and the look, you're probably gonna need a name. How about Dry Ineffective or Polar Bear 1? Something along those lines. You guys pick. But in case that's not replicatable for you guys, here's another great idea on how to get rich in the present day. Step 1 is be born into a family where your parents see you more as an opportunity to make money than their flesh and blood. At that point, have parents that create a toy channel based around you. After a few videos of you opening toys that you're excited about, your parents will begin raking in the money. And as you grow up, you'll be like, I had a weird childhood, but my parents are rich. And I think I have money, maybe. And later down the line, we'll see what happens. So yeah, 2 extremely replicatable and honestly foolproof plans on how to get rich in the present day.